just either guess one, guess, and guess one. It's some variation on that.
I never got your text. I only got the one that you sent out to everybody.
It's slow, yeah. And you're
See, I don't know if you don't guess. How do I know that?
I don't know because you didn't call me.
Wow.
Maybe you should have called me because I didn't. I couldn't respond.
I think we're good to go.
Well, I didn't know. You said please to everybody, so I said fine.
Good evening.
Anyway, so
Welcome to ANC 3F's July 2013 meeting at the Methodist Home at Connecticut Avenue. I am Adam Tope, Chairman of ANC 3F, and we can introduce ourselves starting to my left with David.
I'm David Solorison-Lowell of 3F06. I'm the secretary.
Mary Beth Ray, 3F03.
Bob Summersgill, 3F07. I'm the treasurer.
Karen Perry, Vice Chair, ANC 3F02.
Sally Gresham, ANC 3F04.
Manoli Perniotakis, 3F05.
Thank you. So we live stream our meetings so you can watch them on the web. If you are speaking, speak into your microphone. So everyone whose microphone is really far away, just bring it a lot closer, or people will not be able to hear you.
That's good.
Could be. First item is approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes, deletions, or anything else to the agenda?
Me.
Yeah,
Can we just have a small executive session at the end?
sure. Anything else? Okay, given that, all in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Next up is our consent agenda. Does anyone have any deletions from the consent agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from last month? Seeing none, all in favor of the consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Next up is our formal agenda. Is there a police officer here? And there is not. Okay. We will skip that and then we'll reach out to them again. Next, we'll do commissioner announcements. If the commissioners have a minute or so of announcements each, they can give those. Otherwise, just say you don't have any. So we'll start with David and work our way
No
down.
announcements.
I have four brief announcements. The first announcement is that on Thursday, July 18th, at 7:30 p.m. at the Methodist Home, we'll have a meeting to talk about the proposed DC water renovation of Soapstone sewer. This is a huge project. If anybody would like more information, please see me. There is information we can email you. There's a possibility that 300 to 400 trees will be taken down in Soapstone Valley. So this is big news. Marjorie Scher, who is one of my constituents, has really done a yeoman's job of trying to get the word out and exploring alternatives. If you're interested, please contact me. The second announcement is this Saturday, July 20th, we'll have an international soapstone cleanup. Rock Creek Conservancy is partnering with the State Department, which is putting on a program to demonstrate to international visitors how Americans do community service. And so this will be have a little bit of a twist from our usual soapstone cleanup. So I hope you're able to come to that. We'll meet at Albemarle and 32nd Street at the entrance to Soapstone this Saturday at 9 a.m. Please come. I'll be there. The third announcement is a Van Ness Pecha Kucha. Has anybody heard of a Pecha Kucha? So a Pecha Kucha is a presentation where there are 20 slides, and each slide is given 20 seconds. And Mina Marifat, who is a member of the Van Ness Vision Committee, teaches graduate real estate students at Johns Hopkins. And her students are doing a Pecha Kucha on Van Ness tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. So if you're able to go, you must RSVP and see me, and I'll tell you how to do that. The fourth and final announcement is that we will not have a Van Ness Vision Committee meeting in August. Our next meeting will be Friday, September 13th at 9 a.m. back at UDC.
Nothing for me, thanks.
I do not have any announcements either.
Not for me.
No.
I have two announcements. An update on the 4401 building, which is the AU WAMU building. They project that floors 2, 3, 4, and 6 are now occupied, and they will have the completed building occupancy by July 24th, with the front studio that you see from the front on the far left-hand side, and the public space work to be completed by September 1. They have had a problem with 2 major gas lines that are under the public space area in the front. That's why the last time I talked about the grading issue with DDOT, they were not where the plan showed them from Washington Gas, so they have had to do a special type of encasement and get it approved by DDOT, which they are hoping approval will come this week, and they will be able to start the work in 2 weeks on the public space. The second thing is the Forest Hills Playground. They have done a conceptual design, the Trust for Public Land design team. It's a hand sketch. DPR has seen one. They had it in-house for a month. They had some comments on it, so they went back to the design team and asked them to redo it, which they did. They are now happy with the plan, and they hope to get a more formal presentation in the next several weeks, sometime early August. The new contact is Stacy West from the Department of Parks and Recreation, and Kent Whitehead is still the Trust for Public Land Director.
Thanks. Manoli?
Two very quickly. In the first week and a half of September, probably September 10th, we'll be holding a meeting in this space for homeowners who are interested in working with other homeowners about with an organization called DC Sun that allows homeowners to sort of aggregate to potentially get a better price on solar power for their homes. They'll be put out more information through social media and other methods when it's confirmed, but likely September 10th here at 7 o'clock. The other thing is we got the notice from Councilmember Che's office that the 22nd of July is Ward 3 night at Nationals Park, and the first come, first served basis for Ward 3 residents. Pick up tickets starting tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the Wilson Building for Ward 3 residents.
Great, thank you. Next on our agenda is the open forum. If anyone has anything to say that's not about something already on the agenda, you can come up to the microphone and talk about it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item. Okay. Next item we have is Councilmember Grosso, and he is going to speak to us about, I think, public financing campaigns, which is a topic I'm really interested in. So, very excited to hear about it. If you don't mind holding the microphone and speaking into it, even though there's no audio here, it just
That's fine.
screams on the
Is that
internet.
good?
Cool.
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you all for having me out tonight. This is an honor to be here in your ANC because of the fact that you are streaming this live, as well as reporting your finances online, which I find to be incredibly impressive. We have a lot to learn in the D.C. government from this effort. We try to do it on the at the D.C. Council a lot more than when I was a staffer there years ago. But the budget transparency for the D.C. government is a big issue, and I think everyone knows that it's something that we're trying to dig into and something I'm trying to dig into. So I appreciate you all taking the leadership on this. It's a big deal. I've been kind of crisscrossing the city ever since I got elected to try to meet as many people as I can, trying to go to every single neighborhood and really get an opportunity for people to get to know me too. When you're running for election, even though you're doing it for a year and a half, 2 years, you can't. Is it better to go over here?
If you stand in front of our map,
All right.
then then your face will
Yes. Hi. Sorry.
I want you to have your back to the audience.
You can't really, when you're campaigning for 2 years, you can't even then hit everything. So the best way to do it for me is to actually get out and accept every single invitation that I get. So that's what I do, and I'm happy to get an invitation here and come out today. A little bit about my background for those of you that don't know me. I was born in the district and raised in the Petworth community, starting around when I was a teenager. We originally lived out in Loudoun County, Virginia. Came into the city, and then ultimately went to law school. And after law school, I went and worked for Sharon Ambrose, who was the Ward 6 council member. For 6 years, I worked on the city council doing a variety of jobs around the Wilson building. In fact, I started there in 2001, which was the year that we moved back into the Wilson building. For those of you that remember, for a period of time, the council was not in the Wilson building at all. Did 6 years with Councilmember Ambrose, and then did 2 years with Eleanor Holmes Norton as her chief of staff. Her legislative director and chief counsel. Did a whole lot of issues, of course, on voting rights and other things that are important to the district there. Spent 4 years in the private sector, and then ran for office a year and a half ago against, everyone knows, Michael Brown, and won in the fall. So I've been on the council for 6 months now, a little over 6 months. Been through one budget cycle, which is really the main job that we have up there, in my opinion. Besides a lot of other really important issues, the budget is something that I really feel a responsibility for, to try to make sure that we can better align it, to make it more efficient and effective government. And that's really something that I ran on and am trying to work on. Many of you may know already, I did not have a committee assignment given to me. So I am, instead, I insisted on being on more committees so I could be more engaged. So I'm on 5 committees, plus the committee of the whole, which I actually say I'm on 6 committees. I don't think enough members are engaged in the committee of the whole the way they should be. And so I make an effort to pick issues in the committee of the whole that I can really engage in. The one that I picked this year that I've been involved pretty heavily in is the issues around UDC and the community college, because I just feel like, that's an issue that every single one of us is impacted by, and we have an opportunity to try to turn it around over the next couple years. It's been a learning experience that you can imagine. It was a very steep learning curve for me. I'd never really paid much attention to it. I think I'm at a good spot now where I understand where we need to go, and I'm trying to figure that out even more as we move forward. I'm also on the Committee on Education, which I think is the one that I wanted to be on more than any other committee, and for obvious reasons. We are at a turning point in our city when it comes to education reform and to where we're going to go from here. I believe that it was necessary for us to do the mayor takeover and move forward with the Michelle Rhee plan, but the problem is now we're 5 years, 6 years down the road, and there's very little assessment that's been done, very little monitoring of what's going on in the program. So we're spending a lot of time in the committee asking questions about strategic planning, asking questions about what has happened. Have you been successful in any area at all, or are we even measuring success correctly? And you might have heard that we introduced 7 bills in the Committee on Education about a month and a half ago. We've had 5 hearings in the council and the committee on these bills. It's everything from granting DCPS charter authority to changing the way that we do budgeting and doing it more local at the school level, all sorts of provisions in these bills. And ultimately, we are having 8 public meetings. So we started in Ward 5. Tomorrow night we're in Ward 7, and we're moving throughout the city in every single ward to have public meetings for people to come out and opine, ask questions. In the first public meeting we had, 75+ people came out to it. That's a remarkable turnout, and it just shows you what the interest is around this issue and how we can make our city work kind of towards a more quality education place than we are now. The Committee on Education is an interesting one for me also because, I didn't pay much attention to this when I was in the council before. I did economic development. I did a lot of DCRA issues around regulatory issues, banking issues, insurance issues. But when I was out campaigning, education was the #1 issue that people raised. And so for me, it was an obligation. I feel like that's what I've been put there to do. I brought on a legislative director who has a degree an advanced degree in education from Princeton, because many people bring on LDs that are lawyers and other types, but I felt like it was important to have somebody there who was strong in education issues, who understood education kind of from a global perspective. She worked in New York City. She worked and of course in Princeton, got her degree. So I'm excited to have Christina Henderson on board. She's helped me try to understand all the different provisions of these laws, where we're going, what's possible, and I think we're heading in the right direction. Do I think that David Catania's plan for education reform is perfect? Certainly not. I think we have a lot of work to do, and we've put out a call to people to come out and give their opinions and their thoughts, and I hope people will do that, which is important. I'm also on the Committee on Finance and Revenue. This is another committee that I asked to be on. I felt like it was important for somebody else to be engaged in that effort, to be involved in the hearings, to be under the kind of watching out what's happening with the CFO's office and other areas. And there's been some significant, I think, controversy in this year, as there has been in the past, with the CFO's office, and it's really something that we have to pay more attention to and study. I'm not saying Councilmember Evans hasn't done the best job that he can do. What I'm saying is that no other council members paid attention, and that's frustrating. That's frustrating to everybody. So I have to tell you, I go to these hearings, and for those of you that watch Channel 13, you'll know I go to every hearing. So it's kind of an odd feeling, I think, for my colleagues, because they're not sure what to do with another council member there. They kind of look over and they say, "What? Oh, hi. Oh, Councilmember Grasso is here," because they're not used to it. It's just not the culture of the Wilson Building to go to other people's hearings. And in fact, it wasn't for a long time, because they didn't have everyone had their own committee. So a lot of people just focused, intensely on their own committee's issues, and that's what they did. I'm a little bit freed up because I don't have my own committee. I'm able to go to every single one of these hearings, and I usually get a fairly warm reception. Sometimes it's a little bit, kind of annoyed, because it doubles the number of questions that you can ask the witnesses. It, prolongs the hearing a little bit, and it's not that my colleagues ever had short hearings, but they're a little longer now because I'm going to all of them. So Finance and Revenue is one where we do a lot of kind of questioning and understanding. I'm also on Business and Consumer Affairs, which is Vincent Orange's committee. I'm also on the Health Committee, which is Yvette Alexander's committee. And so, and finally I'm on Transportation and the Environment, which is Mary Chay's committee. Each of these committees have given me an opportunity to get extremely well versed in what's happening and what we're doing in the council. And now we've gotten through the budget process with them, which I think we have some good victories in the budget this year. I'd tell you one thing, though. The last budget I worked on as a staff member with Ms. Ambrose, we had a deficit that we had to deal with. This is now a different whole city when it comes to finances. And the question then is, how do we do a better job balancing this out? So, I'm glad to see Jerry here to talk about the Tax Revision Commission. It's something that I've been committed to supporting the work there and understanding the work they're doing there, and then looking forward to the kind of the final outcome as it comes out over the next 9 months or so in December, and really put us in a position to where we can align our tax structure better with surrounding jurisdictions, where we can do a better job with helping people understand our tax structure. And I believe they're doing a comprehensive approach, which is really, really important. I just want to hit on a couple of big topics, and then if I can open it up for questioning, I think that would be great. Public financing is really the reason that, you mentioned I was out here, and I did have we had a hearing in the Committee on Government Ops last Thursday, where Kenya McDuffie, the chair of the committee, and I had introduced a bill to put in public financing of campaigns in the District of Columbia. This would be modeled after the federal Fair Elections Now Act, and the concept is that we would have small dollar donations matched by public money, so that more people would get engaged and more people would run for office. And it's kind of a two-pronged deal there. You have the people that right now, I think there's a discouragement. They think that the big money runs things, and that's a reality to a certain extent. And so they don't really get involved. They don't really care what's happening down at the Wilson Building or in other elections. And then on the other end, you have people that might want to run for office who can't do it. They simply can't afford to not have their job. Their job won't let them run. and they have to, find a way to do it in a different manner than just trying to raise millions of dollars off of folks that they don't even know. So what this does is it allows them to do low dollar matches. We had a guy that we Skyped in from Connecticut, where this has already been successfully running for the past 5 or 6 years. And in the hearing, he said, he was a community activist before public financing, and never thought he'd ever have a chance to run for office. But yet, once he got low dollar matching, he realized that he had a real good advantage, because he had to maybe get 200, 300 people to give $50, $100. It's a whole lot easier than trying to beat the incumbent by going after the same donor base the incumbent has. And he was able to win, and he's run for re-election 3 times since then and won every single time using an exclusive public financing matching campaign. The other benefit to it is that the match, when you say to somebody, will you donate $10 to my campaign, if you donate 10, the government will match 4 to 1 or 5 to 1. I think that really gives the people an incentive to try to get up and do what they can. The final note on this is that this is a work in progress. This is not something that we thought was the end-all, be-all bill that would solve all the problems in the D.C. government. And in fact, this bill itself is not perfect. We've had great suggestions from lots of different people on how we can improve it. We have a great way that we're going to move forward in. We didn't even hold a hearing on the bill. We held a hearing on the issue so we could get more experts involved and understand it. And I think we're going to end up in a much better place. I'll note, though, that I think that public financing of campaigns is just one thing that we have to do in this city. I think in order to get more people engaged and involved in politics, we have to create a better space for them to do that. And that means we have to encourage more people to get involved in elections, period, and think that that matters. So I'm supporting also, open primaries where people can vote in primaries from any party. I'd even go a step further and say that we should have nonpartisan elections and local elections in the District of Columbia. I think that we should also look closely at instant runoff voting, so that you can vote for more than one person going down the line, and if need be, you get to up to 51%. It creates an opportunity for a real majority representation. There's a lot of different things here that I think are important from the electoral perspective and reform perspective. I also think that council members need to hold themselves more accountable. So there are specifically 2 things that I've done different than any other council member's done to try to lead the way in doing this. One is I don't have a constituent services fund. I'm not sure if everyone knows what that is, but essentially what it is when you're elected into the D.C. Council, you can have outside entities, including lobbyists and other people, donate to your constituent services fund. It's limited and they have to report it, but essentially then you can spend it on almost anything you want. And frankly, it's just another opportunity for a potential conflict of interest, in my opinion. And so I decided not to have one. The practical, effect of that is that I pay for everything myself and try to work it out and negotiate with my wife on a daily basis on what we're going to do. But it doesn't, it's not that much. And in fact, the real reality is that the government working well will eliminate the need for a constituent services fund, because you have executive agencies that have the authority and the money and the ability to solve these people's problems and work with them in order to make sure they have what they need to get by. And that's why we have such a great constituent services person in Dion Calhoun who spends all day trying to help people get connected. Rather than just writing a check, she's helping them get connected to a sustainable, real future of help. And the other thing I don't do, and this is, I think, a little bit more controversial, I don't vote on contracts over $1 million in the D.C. Council. So I'm the only council member that votes present every single time, and people have criticized me for it. But the reality is that, and just a little background, everything that's over $1 million that the executive branch agrees to, whatever contract it is, has to come to the council for council approval. And the council has to vote on it, yes or no, in order for it to move forward. And this is after we've already done our budgetary oversight, our performance oversight. It's after we've already, monitored the mayor the best we can. We go back and get a second bite at the apple, in my opinion. I don't support that. So what I've done is I've voted present on every single one. And the reason I've done that is because I'm not an expert in contracting and procurement. I'm certainly not an expert in every single one of the issues that come before us in contracts. Sometimes on the dais we have 7, 8, 9 contracts. They're huge contracts. And it's like, by me saying, yes, this is okay, Mr. Mayor, good job, I'm putting my stamp of approval on what could be a really bad job, what could be really not good for the city. but yet I'm just putting my faith in their effort. We know for a fact that the Contract and Procurement Office has not done a great job. We know for a fact that the mayor's budget is not transparent. We don't really know what's going on in there. And so I'm not going to put my name on it. What happens if every council member votes present is a question still to be answered. But I challenged them, and they all haven't stepped up to the plate. Occasionally I have gotten one or two, just out of convenience, voted present because they didn't really like what was going on, and a few have actually recused themselves for other reasons. You know, the reality is that we've done some exciting things at the council this past 6 months. You know, everyone knows about the big ticket issues, the Walmart issue. Everyone knows about probably the licenses, you know, the unmarked licenses for people that are here without papers. Everyone knows all those issues, but there's a lot of stuff the council does that nobody knows about. If I could tell you what was in the consent agenda just in the last session, you'd be amazed at how wonderful we've been, you know, getting stuff done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to open it up now.
The consent
for questions.
agenda was really fantastic.
Thank you,
I mean,
Bob.
nobody knows what was in there, but it was great. Several things that I lobbied for.
Right. I mean, but if you know, if people thought they could see it online better, thought they could be engaged better, thought their voices were heard, thought they were engaged in elections, thought that they had an avenue towards, you know, being involved, they would know what was on the consent agenda and know why it was on there, and they would understand that the council actually is doing really good work every single day. We have huge problems that we still have to overcome, that we're all trying to figure out how to get past. But at the same time, I think we're heading in the right direction. And I'm careful because I believe that when you get up there, you do get a bubble around you. I really believe that, and you can't necessarily feel and see what's happening in the community. And that's why I've done, you know, coffee every Thursday morning in the community, as some of you may or may not have known about, where I just go and sit with no agenda and listen to whoever wants to come in. That's why I'm, you know, trying to just be out at every meeting I can to hear what's going on, going to all these education hearings, going to all these other hearings to try to make sure that I'm in touch still. The last pitch I'll make, and then I'll open it up for questions, is that I also started a blog. And my blog actually has, I think it's the first one ever at the council. My blog actually has comments. You can make your own comments to what I wrote about. Today I published one on why I voted the way I voted with Walmart. You know, why I voted for the bill to increase the living wage to $12.50. So I wrote another one that's probably really controversial on why I voted the way I did, or what my opinion. See, we didn't even get to vote, so this one was even more opportunistic. Why I was able to, why I supported what was going on at the zoning commission and what was going on with the change in zoning, which is very controversial. I even took an opinion on all three of the hot button issues. And then one of them got pulled right out. So the parking one. So I could have waited and then not gotten in trouble. But for me, it's about being open and transparent and saying, here's what my positions are. There's no better way to do that than the blog. We can wait all day for the media to pick up our positions, which it does in a very, very kind of chopped way and figures out how we fit in. But the reality is, if you want to speak for yourself, you have to, I think, put it out there. And that's what I'm trying to do. I think by having comments on there, it'll help. Did I miss anything? Well, I'll open it up. Maybe you guys can bring up what I missed.
Great. We have some time for questions. So if there's any commissioners that have a question, we'd start with Manoli and work our way down. If you do.
Sure. Thank you for coming tonight, Councilmember Bresso. Very glad to hear what you had to say about constituent service funds. And I think it's definitely consistent with your with the issues that you campaigned on, given that my understanding is that constituent service funds seem to very rarely actually go towards constituent services. So you've taken an interest in UDC and that you've been looking at sort of where do we go from here. So what have you been thinking so far as far as where do we go from here? Because UDC is in our commission area. It's something that's of high interest to us, both in some of the things that are going on campus, but then also the potential for interacting with the community and developing as an institution of higher learning.
I'm glad you asked that. You know, the reality is the community college right now is in a time of enormous transition. The accreditation from Middle States is happening as we speak. They're going to be reaccredited or not next year. That's tenuous. We're looking at that. We're trying to figure out if they're going to be able to do it. They have, I think, gone through a really tough time with Sessoms leaving the way that they had to have him leave, with now Lyons, coming in. Lyons is a very experienced president. He's been in Maryland for a long time, doing great work. I think he has the potential to help this out. And I think, it is about, and I'm not sure where, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know how it's going to turn out, and it makes me very nervous. But I do believe that they are on a path to some kind of change. What that means, I don't know. Maybe it means a smaller college, a smaller university, a more direct focus. I personally would like to see a more kind of direct approach to their kind of what their base is, which I think includes kind of what they call boomerang students that come back from other schools to the district and then need to have a place to go and get an education. I also think that they've got some good graduate programs that are doing really well. So maybe you have a niche there between those two entities. I think their partnership with the community college is extremely important. The community college is also going through an accreditation process. And the reality is that the two of them are intertwined so much that it's going to be hard to see how one survives without the other. So both have to survive and both have to be successful, and that's something that I'm really committed to. But at the same time, the community college is, going, gangbusters. There's tons of people that are going there for both academic programs as well as for job training, workforce development. They have trained over almost 10,000 people in the past 4 years to get them into jobs in the district. It's really important. So, I'm not sure where it's going to go. Leadership is the key. And the board is I think, well led by Ms. Kreider, although I think she's got a lot on her plate right now, and we'll see if she can do it. One thing's for certain is we're going to be involved in it and engaged in it at the committee level and pretty intensely. And we'll see how that plays out, because we haven't in the past.
Is it on UDC? Sure. Yep.
No one at home can hear you if you don't use the microphone.
Here, we'll just.
Just come over and use mine.
No, here, you said. So I'm terribly interested in UDC. I have been for many years, and frustrated because it's very hard to find out what's going on and to even participate in classes and just to learn about it. And the community college, where is it? What is it doing? It doesn't get any publicity, really. So how are you all going to be involved other than the budget, and how can other people help? I think it's a very important resource.
I totally agree. And there are tons of programs that they do offer. They haven't gotten a good job. They haven't done a good job promoting them or getting them out to the community, in my opinion. And how do we get them to do that? I will note there is a balancing act that we have to play here. The D.C. Council or any government that imposes its will too much on an educational institution and undermines at all their autonomous ability to do education the way they believe they should do it, brings the ire of middle states, the accrediting entities. And so you have to be very careful. I think that balance has been a little out of whack in the past. So I've actually met with middle states people and said, what are my parameters, what can I do and what can I not do? And in fact, we can do a lot around promotion. We can do a lot around, really holding them accountable for planning and for strategic engagement. We can't say you can hire and fire a certain teacher. We can't say you must teach this particular course. Those things are out of line. But I agree. There are a lot of great things happening there. The community college is the same thing. I mean, there's a presence online, but that's about it. So we have to figure out how to get it out there more.
All right, thanks. Do any other commissioners have questions?
I do.
Karen, Keith, speak into your microphone.
I'll try. Thank you for coming tonight, Council Member. A couple of quickies for you. One, your coffee's in the morning. Some of my constituents have asked if you can do some things in the evening or on weekends because they can't make it in the morning.
The easy answer there is yes. We should just set something up. What I was trying to do was something regular in 4 parts of the city, and to be honest, it hasn't worked out great. So I'm looking for changes. So let's set it up.
A lot of people that go to work in the morning don't have time to stop by, politics and pros and have coffee. So that's just a suggestion. Also, it's my understanding that you now have control of the oversight over our ANCs. Is that correct? No?
Personally?
No, You don't
No,
have-
the Government Operations Committee does have oversight over ANCs. Yep.
Okay, but we would like your help. I would
Okay.
like your help in that committee. I know I'm frustrated by DDOT. And I'm frustrated in that we have public space permits for our sidewalk cafes. We approve them, whatever. We're supposed to monitor, supervise them. And yet I go up to DDOT to get a copy of what was actually approved, because some are for 3 months, some are for 6 months, some have year-round approvals. And as an ANC commissioner, we're told to file FOIA requests. Yeah,
That's ridiculous.
that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And other agencies of the government don't treat us like we're part of the government, yet you want us to fill out financial disclosure forms as if we are.
Right.
So, I mean, it's this catch-22. I don't think for a public document, I should have to file a FOIA, wait, you know.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. And certainly with DDOT and other agencies that I do actually have oversight over through the committee structure, I'm happy to call Terry Bellamy and tell him that he shouldn't be doing that. You know, they have sometimes there's a good reason to have a FOIA on, you know, and require a FOIA, but most of the time it's just not true. And
for a
it's
public
frustrating.
document and something that
Right.
we're the ones who originated and passed on, it doesn't
Makes
seem
no
to-
sense.
Makes no sense. My other thing, and I'm glad Gottlieb Simon is here tonight from the Office of the ANCs. They have had for years something at DDOT called a TOP system. So like tonight when we do this public space permit that we're going to have come before us, all of the agencies are sent that. And everybody writes their comments into this, quote, TOP system.
Right. I've seen it.
Everybody but the ANC. And I think we've been asking for quite a while as to why we don't have access to it. It
Right.
would be nice before we pass a resolution to know what Urban Forestry said, or PEPCO, or whoever.
So you can't have access to that regularly. They make you FOIA for that too, or do you?
We don't have access, period.
To TOPS, okay.
We have to call the individual people, the reviewers, and
I
ask
see.
them to, if they would, send us a copy of what they sent.
I've been
And
calling the,
what's weird is we're listed in it.
well, it says,
So-
oh, this is
Yes.
the first one we've been listed in. It says,
It's kind of weird.
ANC select member not sent.
I think,
What I do is call the girl who's on the Commission of Fine Arts when I want to
Yeah.
know, and then she copies, Xeroxes what's already been sent in,
And
and she,
can pull it out for you.
and she sends it to me by email, which is, I should have to call
No.
Fine Arts.
ANCs are actually getting access to TOPS, but they're doing ANC by ANC training, so we're just behind the curve on that.
For about 2 years or 3 years.
But they've just made it available to ANCs, so
Okay.
they're getting to us, but we're not high on the list.
Well, keep me informed on how it's going. And if it's not moving along as quickly as we think it should, then I'll get involved for sure.
Okay.
You know, it seems to me pretty clear that you should be able to look at that and access it and be involved in it. Perhaps, why can't everybody look at that? Well,
Especially if you're making a resolution.
yeah, exactly.
helps.
If you've asked,
I agree.
Great. Bob, do you have any questions?
Yeah, real softball. Are you still meeting at Politics and Prose?
No, we are
You're not.
canceled for the summer. We're going to go start up again. And we're going to, like I said, probably tweak it a little bit to take into some of the kind of learning experiences we've gotten and see what we can do.
Okay.
can that be announced on our ANC? or
Sure.
can you send
Absolutely.
us
I'll
a-
send it around for sure.
Right.
We can
Yes,
circulate.
please do.
Thank
Mary
you. Good
Beth,
point.
do you have any
No
questions?
questions.
And David?
Yeah, what do you think is the best way to support public financing?
Well, we have, you mean as an individual, as an ANC? I mean, it would be great to have the support of the ANCs, you know, to put in a resolution and support that you think it's a good approach. Come down and testify in support in the fall when we move the bill in an actual hearing. And, you know, just look at it, read it, give us your ideas, give us your suggestions. I mean, that's really the value here is that, you know, more than one person is making this stuff up. You know, we should all be involved, all engaged, and experience you have or somebody you know might has can really put us in a spot to do a good bill.
All right, great, thanks.
I
Yep.
submitted written testimony.
I got your testimony, Bob. I was sorry you weren't there, but I read
Yeah, I
your
have a day
testimony,
job, so.
Councilmember,
and I have answers for you.
on financing end, I know on the federal tax forms, when I fill them out at the end of the year, they ask you if you want to contribute $1 or whatever. Is there a way of doing that on the DC tax forms too?
Well, there certainly is a way to do that. We have proposed in our bill the way that we would finance this and create an elections fund is a 1% tax on all contracts over $1 million in D.C. But you know, we doubt that that's going to move forward now that I've heard from enough people that it's not necessarily going to work. So all these ideas are on the table, and in fact, checking a box or adding $1 or something might be a way to do it.
I just don't think it hurts.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing right now is we're doing an assessment of what it will actually cost. We're not sure what we, you know, there's enough experience in the country that we can come up with a pretty good cost for this, and then really know what the kind of what it will be. So my back of the envelope is that it'll be under $1 million per election cycle. So that's not a huge hit. I mean, it's something that we could do if we're committed, you know, to really having a way for every person to feel like they're engaged and involved in the process. I think that's important.
Great. So we have time for like 1 or 2 audience questions. If you have one, raise your hand. So I'll take David, then Michael, and then him. Sorry, I don't know.
Why don't we use my mic? David?
So Dave. It doesn't matter too much. But so one
on
quick
UDC
question.
and transparency and FOIA. When the UDC Board of Trustees finally in April passed a resolution supporting a budget for the fiscal year 2014 that you just voted on and transmitting it to the mayor, it was a one-page resolution approving an attached budget which wasn't attached on their website. When I asked for a copy, I was told I had to apply under FOIA. When I applied under FOIA, I finally got it. It's a large document with a lot of analysis, as one might expect. Now, that obviously got to the mayor long after the mayor had sent his budget, so I don't know what good it could do the mayor. It never went to the council, the way the thing works. And the drafts of it leading up to it were never shared with the community. In my view, and I've written this to Chair Cryer and her fellow trustees, it's hard for the community to support the meritorious, real needs of UDC or to understand the issues if we don't see it. The budget document is critical. Now, I understand there's an argument that should be very confidential until it's finally done. But I know from serving on the board of DC Water that all the drafts, which were basically staff work, were out in the open when committees reviewed them, and so the public could see what they were. I wonder what your thinking is of how far transparency should go on this one issue, budget, UDC's proposed budgets, and what you'll do as a council member to try to push that.
You know, as far as we can possibly imagine, I'm for complete budget transparency. I've stated that for a long time. I have no fear that the public is going to come in and, you know, completely dismantle everything in the world. I think it's better for us to step up and say, hey, here it is. What are your thoughts? Here it is. What is your opinion on this? And in reality, we don't do that in any agency, right? UDC is a stark example, though. And I'm not sure. I think one of the ways, you know, I've contemplated this might sound a little bit weird, but the budget office at the council gets a kind of entire data dump of the mayor's budget sometime in, you know, the spring, late winter, early spring when we get it transmitted. It's a lot of data, and I've been, you know, kind of scheming on how I can get my hands on it and just open it up to the public and say, what do you think? Because right now the way we put it out to the public is in a non-sortable, non-arrangeable, non-comparable way that makes it impossible for you to really have an informed opinion on it. In fact, when you talk about the budget you finally saw, or the discussion, it was probably a PDF, you know, without any ability to really search very well and do comparison. And I mean, you can look for terms, and that's about it. That's not the way to go about engaging the public either, and that frustrates me. I think it should be everywhere. And this comes directly from my frustration, again, as a staff member on the council. We got the same stuff as staff members. How are you supposed to do a good job? How are you supposed to really engage the executive branch and do oversight in the budget process if you don't have a real workable document in front of you and something that you can, cross-tab and everything with? You just can't do it. So with UDC, I was astonished to learn from President Lyons that they've never had a budget committee in a while to actually develop their budget. So I'm not sure who was actually doing that budget. That's a bit frustrating. And if you don't have a budget committee, I mean, he I think is trying to implement one now to try to. And a budget committee in most universities would engage the community, would engage students, teachers, other entities to have a fairly public proposal that goes to the board then that they can hash out. That's not happening. Why is that? Where's the secrecy? Why is there secrecy? That to me is maddening. So I thank you for keeping on raising it, because I'll need help. I mean, I can only push so far before I'm told, I'd like to work directly through the committee, please.
Thanks. Michael, you have a quick question?
Councilman, being here. Ed Smith, Firefighters Union President, sends his regards. Thank you for the firefighters book that your office shared with me through him. You made mention about, and I believe the culture of corruption is promoted by the one-party system. You made mention about non-partisan election. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that when we have local elections, nobody would be a Democrat, nobody would be a Republican, nobody would be a Green Party, nobody would be anything. You'd all be non-parties, and you would run on your issues. You would run on what is important to you. You would run, a normal election, and then we would have maybe 5 or 6 people qualify for the primary ballot. Top 2 or 3 would then go on to the general election, depending on which election it is. And then ultimately, you'd have to have instant runoffs, too, because you'd always want to have 51% of the population represented at least.
You may be aware, independent is deemed a party affiliation. It ought not be.
But not in the District of Columbia. It's no party, actually. We call it independent, but when you actually register, it says no party.
Well, it's independent. You sit on the Judiciary Committee, I understand.
Nope.
No? I wanted to ask you, are you aware of Chief Judge Satterfield's status?
Nope.
In light of his heart ailment. I know Judge Weisberg is interim Chief Judge.
Is that right?
Yeah, and what's happening with
I didn't know that.
Finally, I want to thank the Northwest Current. They are excellent with updating us on community events. They made mention about UDC, about the ANC filing a complaint about university non-compliance with campus plan requirements. I got wind of you being here tonight because of the event listed in the Northwest Current.
I, too, agree. The Northwest Current is a great resource.
Indeed it is. I'd like to talk to you a little bit offline and give you some information that we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
Great.
Appreciate
Thanks, Michael.
Do we have one?
Last question of the evening for you.
Hi, good evening, Councilman. My name is Robert Klein. I was former chair of the Advisory Neighborhood Commission here about 40 years ago. I now have the dubious distinction of being a tax practitioner in the District of Columbia, and I'm wondering, what are you experiencing currently with regard to congressional pressure or oversight in lieu of the problems with the Internal Revenue Service and the problems, quite frankly, that have plagued the Office of Tax and Revenue in the district?
I have to tell you, I don't really know what's happening there. I haven't seen a lot of congressional kind of chatter on that lately, so I'm not sure, unfortunately. I'd love to hear more about it, so if you have some.
At least from a governmental oversight perspective on the DC.
In general,
in terms of how they may be overlaying and attempting to add additional pressure
Right.
on the council in that.
Well, we have a constant battle up there in Congress that I've worked on when I was with Ms. Norton's office, and now I'm certainly very keen and aware of. One provision that we have that keeps coming back, of course, is the ban on spending on abortions, local and federal money. There was for years a provision that banned the implementation of a referendum that legalized medical marijuana in the District of Columbia. That was removed a number of years ago when the Democrats had control of the House, and Jose Serrano removed it. That has not been put back on. So I guess they're letting that one go. Guns are always an issue, as you're aware of. Needle exchange to try to prevent the spread of HIV in the district and other diseases is something they always go after. We would like to spend local money and federal money on needle exchange programs, and they stop us from doing that, and they put that in again this year. The big one this year, though, and that everyone's kind of on pins and needles about, is the local budget autonomy provision. If you remember, we passed this overwhelmingly in the special election, a provision that would give us budget autonomy, so our budget wouldn't have to go up there at all. And it's laying over right now in Congress for their approval. I believe it's 2 more days. 3 more days. I heard a rumor that there is actual language, though, in one of the budget reports. I'm not sure which one, right off the top of my head, that basically says we can't do what we're trying to do, but it's report language. It's not actual appropriations language like in the past. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's a big one that we're all watching, because if we can get budget autonomy, that's huge. Obviously, we'll be able to spend the money that we raise here in the District of Columbia from our residents on what we believe is most important.
Is there any, at least what my client's asking, is there any further consideration or thought about the status of allowing the deduction for non-DC municipal investments to be counted as non-taxable DC income?
I haven't heard anything up in Congress on this at all. I mean, but I haven't, like I said, I haven't looked for it. I know we passed it, we fixed it, and then now it's, going to have to lay over in the budget process. But I think that fix, and correct me if I'm wrong if anyone knows, I think that fix was in the Budget Support Act, which we passed on emergency basis. So it should be in effect already if the mayor signed the emergency Budget Support Act. Now they'll go through the regular layover process and see if Congress messes with it, but I doubt they will.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
for,
you all very
coming to our
much.
meeting.
Thank you.
You're always welcome back.
Well, I
anytime.
hope you'll invite me again.
Sure.
It takes
It's
me
a
a while to
standing
get used to it.
invitation.
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank
Next
you.
time I won't have my back to the audience.
Especially since you don't have anything else to do.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Our next topic is actually about taxes. So Jerry Whitcomb, the Executive Director of the Tax Revision Committee, is here to talk about what they're doing. A number of our constituents asked us to invite them to talk and are very interested in this topic. So I'll give the floor to him. Yeah,
Please use the
but
microphone.
you have to hold the microphone.
Otherwise, no one at home can hear you.
Or you can just move the stand over. Whatever's easiest.
Well, thank you for inviting us here. This is our first ANC. I drew the short straw, so here I am. I've got you got my little handout. It's a couple of things I'll cover, but then on the second page, you'll see our actual local budget, and this is what we're looking at. How we revise, how we handle this money, and you know that there's probably another $2 billion plus of federal money that gets allocated for various things from the federal government. So I'll try to make this quick and then open it up for questions. If I don't hurt myself here. So the purpose of the commission is basically a good government thing. We had a commission back in 1998. It's been about 15 years. When Kwame Brown was in office, he thought this would be a good idea to sort of have a little check on the mayor. What are we doing with it? To take a little bit of the impetus about how we address this and bring it back to the council. So the purpose of the commission is to look at our tax system and sort of look at it from 5 different aspects. One, the fairness and the apportionment of taxes, broaden the base, how our tax policy can be more competitive versus our surrounding jurisdictions. Councilmember Grasso mentioned that as one of his interests. Encourage business growth and job creation, and then modernize, simplify, increase the transparency of the district's tax code. And Councilmember Grasso also mentioned that, and I think what you all are doing in transparency, we could learn a little bit from that on the whole tax side of the city government. We have a staff about 4.5. We've had some people sort of on contract. We have a federal tax expert who's now becoming a state tax expert. We have a young person from the Maryland School of Public Policy and worked at Pew Foundation. My background is, along with Davis, I went to the Harvard Business School. I worked for a bunch of years at Goldman Sachs before they went public. It was a different company back then. I worked for the DC government, and then most recently I spent 12 years as the Director of Economic Development at the Downtown Business Improvement District, where I'm sort of on loan to the Tax Commission through the end of the year as they complete their work. The commission members were selected jointly, or half by Mayor Gray and half by Council Chair Brown. The chair is former Mayor Anthony Williams. We have 10 other members with a breadth of experience. 4 economists. I'd say one is slightly conservative, one is slightly liberal, and then the 2 are in the middle. And then we have 2 activists and sort of, looking after the lower income people of the city. We have 2 lawyers, and then we have sort of what I call sort of generally 2 business representatives. So it's a pretty broad based group. I joined in March, and we've been meeting since then. Our schedule, we've really had about 12 expert reports coming in on sort of fiscal architecture, sales tax, a lot on real property, because that's pretty complicated in the district with residential and commercial. And so we've finished up the 12 of those. We just had our second public hearing on June 24th. In September, we'll have our final expert reports, and I'm really pleased to say that we're going to have a report on tax administration. This really wasn't covered the last time because I think there were still boxes and closets with unopened tax returns back in '98, and that's no longer the case, but we still have a ways to go. And we've got a fellow named Harley Duncan who used to run the Federation of Tax Administrators, and he's been described as the Michael Jordan of tax administration, so we're really pleased that he's here looking at what we're doing and comparing it to what other people are doing. With the tax administration, you may or may not be aware that they're in the process of looking at a contract for a better system, and that's a big deal because the last system we got is a Cobalt system, and we bought that in about '98, and it was dated then, but it was the only thing going on. There's been so much new development in software that it's going to be so much better in terms of getting refunds faster for taxpayers to figure out what's going on with their own refunds and things like that. And it's a big deal, and hopefully that will be done soon.
Actually pretty archaic in '98.
Yes, no, I know. It was sort of, when we got it in '98, it was 10 years old.
Right.
And now it's really old. So when you want to make a change, it takes like 3 weeks, and it's really, really difficult. So in September, we'll finish up with these expert reports. Then the commissioners' public deliberations will happen in October and in November. Then hopefully in late November, we'll issue draft recommendations and report. And then on December 9th or 16th, we'll have our 3rd public hearing on those recommendations. And then in mid-January, the commission, led by former Mayor Tony Williams, will present it to the council. That will also be sort of a presentation hearing type event that the public will be invited to be at as well. We've also had several council members come. Councilmember Grasso came, Mendelson, Evans, Wells, Bowser, and in September we may have Alexander, McDuffie, and a couple of others. So the invitations are out to them, and we're still trying to figure that out. What we spend a lot of time on is a data collection and research, sort of analyzing our tax system on these 5 aspects. And we're always comparing, we're sort of generally going in, how does our system work? Who gets exempted? How broad's the base? And then how do we look at, like, versus Maryland, Virginia? How do we look compared to the rest of the other 50 states? And then how do we look compared to other large cities that have the same sort of urban dynamics that we have? Boston, San Francisco, in my mind, are the most comparable. New York's always interesting, but they're, in a galaxy of their own. But so that's we're trying to have some rigor in looking at this. So we go through, the economic and demographic trends. Everybody's buying stuff on the internet, so our sales tax, yield is sort of going down. But hopefully there is this federal bill that we will be able to tax the internet, and then that'll come back in. And so there's a lot of things going on. We have a lot of young people moving in here. When you hear the number of 1,000 people, our population's going up 1,000 a month, you have to realize that's because there's 3,800 people moving in a month, 3,200 moving out, and then there's 800 births and 300 deaths. So it's a lot of stuff going on, but what's happening is the population's going up 1,000 a month. Is that going to continue? We seem to have good construction. We have space for it. Hopefully we will. But we have to keep track of that because they can change how our tax revenues. And then we go through all the different taxes. We look at the tax burdens. It's not so much always the rate, because we actually have by far the lowest residential rate in the area, but we have the higher values, so, you know, people are paying higher taxes here. So you have to look at the burden on families, on individuals, and on businesses, and we're trying to do that as well. So you look at all the taxes and what their net effect is. The net effect is, while we could be more progressive, we're actually quite progressive on the absolute scale and versus the rest of the country. We're looking at tax administration, all the types, and we actually have the hardest job in tax administration in the country because we are a state in a local jurisdiction, so we have property taxes, which are generally local taxes, plus the sales and income taxes that are usually state taxes. The tax transparency is very frustrating. You know, from my point of view, at the downtown bid, we wanted to know, you know, what the sales per square foot in downtown for retailers were, so we could advertise it. It's very hard to get. Likewise, the people, you know, on Rhode Island Avenue want to know that, and the people in Georgetown want to know that. So there's a lot of transparency. You know, how many people, how many companies pay the 9.975% sales tax? Why can't that be available to everybody? And it's partly the system, and it's partly attitude, and we need to, you know, look at both of those. Your help would be helpful here in terms of being transparency, and I think David will be a big help on that as well. And so with our report, you know, we're going to cover a little bit of background, things that happened in the 98 commission. They did a big thing there. They wanted to have a value-added tax, which, you know, theoretically a lot of economists like, but nobody does. So it went down in flames. I don't think we're going to be doing anything that radical. But a lot of the other little things, like our real estate taxes were very high on both multifamily and commercial, and they've come down a little bit. And then some other things in terms of making filings easier for individuals got done. We'll be looking at the demographic and economic trends, and then we'll sort of look at all the different tax types again and sort of discuss them and basically have a rating system of them. Are we doing a good job, a bad job? And those areas where we're not doing a good job are more likely to lead to our recommendations. In our recommendations, we're going to sort of look at a bunch of different scenarios, you know, revenue neutral scenarios, reduce revenue scenarios. In fact, the council has set aside $18 million of the fiscal 14 budget for recommendations in terms of tax reductions. It doesn't go very far. The 0.25% reduction in the sales tax was more than that $18 million. If you were to knock down either the commercial property or the commercial income tax rate by about 2%, you would sort of cover that. And so it doesn't buy you a lot, but that's money there that we're going to be careful about assigning a recommendation to. And then we're going to, again, look through all the different tax types, again, rating them on, you know, fairness, their progressiveness, their broad base, their competitive thing. What we end up having is, you know, for instance, we have a real estate tax, but then we have senior exemptions. Some of the economists on our council argue that we're narrowing the base, and what we should do is have a social program that sends checks to the seniors. But there becomes a cash flow and an implementation thing, and I think most people would at this point in time, are not trusting of the government to send them the check, so they'd rather never give the check to the city. But what it does is you end up with people with all sorts of different tax rates, and it creates some inefficiencies. And so you have the economists arguing for this, and then you have the reality in the political situation that, you know, there is a need there, and how do you meet that need? And so we're going to be trying to balance those as we go forward. And eventually, in the staff's point of view, we're going to put together 40 or 50 recommendations, you know, probably 2 sides of a page with the, you know, what it is, what it's trying to do, pluses and minuses, and the revenue impact of what we suggest. Those will be sort of the drivers of the deliberations, and those will be released in late September before the deliberation. They'll be public, so everyone can look at them and comment on them. And we obviously welcome your input. And the last part is your input. You know, we have a website. It's a little Spartan, but it allows you to communicate with us. And so please send your ideas, and there are plenty of people who have been sending their ideas. David, wherever he is, has sent in a lot of ideas. And we've had a public hearings. We're going to have a couple more, so people can give their input there. And then if you would like to, just call me. And I didn't put my email address down here. It's jerry.whitcomb@dc.gov. That's how you reach me.
Great. Do you have a couple minutes for questions if someone asks? So do any commissioners have a quick question at all? No? Does anyone from the audience have a question? Oh, you have a question?
I was just,
Sorry, Karen.
that's okay. I was just looking at this sheet of the estimates and whatever, and noticing a lot of different things going to the ballpark fund. Why? The ballpark is making money now.
Well, all these taxes, as I remember, were new taxes, so they weren't coming out of the general fund. And particularly, the biggest one is the ballpark fee, which was a new tax on businesses. And many businesses are not happy about it, but it is working. And so the ballpark is being paid for by the rent, a very small rent on the stadium. And then the ballpark fee, plus this toll communications, and there's one other thing, which is the
What are the toll communications?
I believe on commercial property, the rate was increased from 10 to 11%, and that additional 1% went in there. And so the idea was that it wasn't being paid for by the existing taxpayers of the District of Columbia. It was a new tax.
My other question, have you looked at doing something more like the federal income tax system for DC residents, instead of just having those two tax categories?
Oh, you mean having more stages?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a suggestion by a lot of people. And when we look at our progressivity, as I said, we're doing pretty well on an absolute basis. It sort of turns in this sort of 60, 70, 80,000 range and becomes a little less progressive. And so currently we hit 8% at 40,000. And so the idea might be to, maybe you get to 8% at 100,000 or something, for example. But do some more tiers in there.
That's what I was going to ask,
Yeah.
because I hear from a lot of the lower paying lower income residents in my building that they think they are paying too much.
Yeah. And this current budget has,
senior citizens on fixed
the
incomes.
current budget, in terms of lower income people, lowering the sales tax from 6 to 5.75, that's the most progressive tax we have. So that was helpful. And then for low income property owners, there's this thing called Schedule H. And that amount went from $750 to $1,000 and is
I
going
don't
to.
think people feel that as much as when they go in for doing their income tax.
Yeah, no, we agree. And there's been a lot of comment. And I think, one of the things we're looking at is we are having people move into the city, and we're doing quite well financially. And so as we go forward, you may or may not remember a thing called tax parity back from '98. Evans and Catania did it and said, as we grow, we're going to do some tax reduction. And I think that's probably something we're likely to do.
Okay.
Cool. Do any other commissioners have a question? Bob?
Yeah, it says ICF MR assessment, and then all that money apparently is transferred to Stevie Sellos. Who is Stevie Sellos?
Yeah, I saw that.
On line 51 and 52.
On 51.
Someone's getting a lot of money.
I don't even know what ICF MR stands for.
Yeah, I have to say, because it's only $1 million, I haven't really focused on it. We've sort of drawn our line at about 40. But I can get back.
This year it's $4 million.
I looked it up. It's the name of a fund, which is named for this facility.
Yeah.
Doesn't go to an individual at all.
I'm very pleased to hear that.
I wish it said Stevie Sellers Fund then on there. What does that fund do?
I don't remember, but it's in a book that the Office of the CFO publishes every year on special purpose revenues. I can find it in email.
No, that's okay, I'm just.
That sounds like an excellent idea.
We'll figure it out. Do any other commissioners have a question? We have time for one or possibly two audience questions. Anyone have a question? We'll take David and Michael. So David first. David, a quick question.
Jerry, you called our attention to the $18 million that the council has set aside for possible recommendation by the commission. And looking at your table, I see that's about 1% of the total revenue from the real property tax. That's an interesting point you called to our attention. Now, as you know, the commission's had proposals about the real property tax, noting that they separately assess the land, the value of the land, and the value of the buildings, but there have been 3 presentations with the same recommendation, namely from the Committee for Smarter the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and from your expert, Dr. Rybeck, and from former Mayor Murphy of Pittsburgh, that the tax rate, real property tax rate on the building part of the assessment be lower than the tax rate on the land part. Is it conceivable, as you understand what the $18 million is for, if the commission thought it was a good idea, that they try out as a very small experiment in that direction, just to use the whole 18 million to reduce the building part of the real property tax rate without reducing the land part?
I can't speak for the commission, but I think that's an interesting idea. You're right, several people have proposed it. It's also important to note that really hardly anybody in the United States does it, because it actually doubles the administration, because now you have people arguing about, instead of just one assessment, they're arguing about the land assessment and they're arguing about the building assessment. But a lot of economists like that idea, and it probably makes sense to do it as a pilot in a small area of the city, and then that $18 million could be used for that. But again, I don't want to speak for the commission because they haven't deliberated on this.
I did look this up. It's the Stevie Sellows Intermediate Care Facility for the Mentally Retarded.
Oh.
And I'm sure Mayor Gray would like the word retarded to be changed to something else. He did pass legislation when he was chair about that.
Thank you, Bob.
And I bet it probably comes from a special fee, and so it's dedicated and then it's just shown separately.
Interesting. Michael, you have a quick question.
Thank you, Adam. Jack Evans, who has had chair of tax and revenue for a number of years, holds his hearings at his convenience. He is partner with Pat Boggs Law Firm. I think the message needs to be sent that, he is there because we are here. And again, his hearings are most inconvenient. One of the most recent hearings he had was with a committee of the whole, unheard of, to fit his schedule. Doesn't accommodate us. So it'd be nice for you to weigh in and say, hey, we the people are the sovereign entity. The law currently provides a nice sweetheart deal, 5 years tax abatement for those of us that qualify on real property taxes. Businesses get 10 years up and running. Can you look into it or make a suggestion, or I don't know if you have, to say homeowners should be on parity too, 10 years or maybe 7 or 8? I'm thinking about too, it's extremely expensive to live in this jurisdiction, and first responders, our firefighters, policemen, young folk, it'd be nice, to attract instead of, taking the revenue here and going to the burbs. Finally, condos are going up like wildfire everywhere. Muriel Bowles currently had a hearing in which I testified. I believe it's DC Official Code Section 42.1903 subsection H. It indicates that when a unit owner makes requests for whatever assessments are due, they have to be forthcoming within 10 days. If not, the slate is wiped clean. Tax and Revenue, accordion company, when I first broached this, what are you talking about? They looked into it, yeah, it's on the books, but they haven't a clue what to do. Basically, there's no oversight. I don't think Tax and Revenue is the entity. I don't think DCRA is. I do think the Department of Insurance, Bank and Securities is, because they currently handle foreclosure. And a condo association come in and foreclose with the same force of law as a lender, but they are not, there's no oversight at all. So it'd be nice for you to weigh in on that and have some kind of input on that.
I'm going to give you my card because that was quite a data dump, and you can send that to me because I can't retain it all.
Great. Well, no problem. So thank you very much for attending and answering our questions. And he's very responsive by email, so feel free to email him. I'm sure he's happy to help.
Thank you very much.
Answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, a presentation by Sustainable DC. Is someone from Sustainable DC here?
I wasn't late.
All right.
My name is John Hermans. I work for the District Department of the Environment. And our primary kind of initiative now is Sustainable DC. Well, first, excuse me for being a sweaty mess coming to your meeting. So Sustainable DC is a big kind of environmental / 3 stools of sustainability plan that we just released. We started working on it back in the summer of 2011. We released it in February, and now we're moving into implementation. And it was Mayor Gray's initial kind of idea. And the way he came about it was he went to some big conference of mayors, and everybody was talking about these incredible sustainability plans they had. And you know, DC didn't have one, but didn't really have like a comprehensive vision. So he wanted to like make sustainable DC kind of, or makes DC stand out as a very green, livable, healthy city. So he brought us together and we pulled together this plan. So now we're moving into implementation of this big wild thing that does a whole lot of stuff. Everything from food to transportation to energy to waste to water to all these different kinds of things, and kind of puts it into one big 20-year vision to make the city the tagline is greenest, healthiest, most livable city in the country. So now as we kind of are transitioning from, you know, this planning process that took almost 2 years into, you know, actually implementing something that we think has a lot of value and potential and room to do a lot of great things in the city over the next 20 years, we're kind of in this phase where, you know, we can do a lot to, from the government side, to actually, you know, improve our operations and try and make things a little bit more efficient and provide better services and this kind of stuff. But what we really are trying to make sure that we include in this whole process is not just a government-sided, you know, thing that is kind of behind some curtain or isn't so transparent. We really want to see if there's a way to engage people in communities and neighborhoods a little bit better. So that's kind of why we come out to meetings like this and to whatever we'll take, or whatever people ask us to do. We're more than willing to come out and talk and kind of tell you all about some of the things that we're trying to achieve. And, you know, the district can do so much, but there's a whole other side of this thing that we won't do unless we can actually engage a lot of folks throughout the city, in every ward and in every kind of sector, to engage with us. So, but we don't really know how to do that yet. So there's a lot of, I mean, you know, we're setting policies for purchasing greener vehicles, and we're setting policies for managing stormwater a little bit better and all this other stuff, but we don't really know, like, how do we let the community side of things, like, actually run? So we have a few ideas, but we really need to just try and get more people on board, and more people who are aware of the plan and know what the benefits of sustainability are, because, you know, frankly, it's a very kind of ethereal, flexible, undefined kind of term that people, you know, give or take. So I don't want to take too much of your time, but that's what we're doing. I think that, you know, if you're interested in learning more, we do have a website, sustainable.dc.gov, and you can come to me with more questions. Yeah, that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Cool. So do any commissioners have any questions about the Sustainable DC programs at all?
No questions.
I do have questions, but I can take it offline. Can you just give me your email address, please?
Yeah,
Do you have
I'll grab a card.
Do you have cards for us all?
Cool.
Sure.
And any,
My email? Yeah, it's john.heermans@dc.gov. So that's spelled JOHN dot, last name is HEERMANS. MA as in Apple, N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, I guess. But I'll hand out cards. And
Cool. Well, let's see. Any other commissioners have a question about any of the programs Sustainable DC is doing? Okay. Does anyone?
familiar faces.
Does anyone in the?
I don't really have any questions I've asked in the meetings.
All right. Yeah, you've already asked them.
But I'm not going to bike in this kind of weather.
I wish I hadn't had to.
Does anyone in the audience have a question? Michael, you have a quick question.
Of great concern, trolley file, 400 million out the gate, no definitive figure with the mayor. But from an environmental standpoint, we're on electricity, coal burning. We really need it. You know, put it this way, commissioners, do you want this trolley file up on Connecticut Avenue? Traffic is already a nightmare. You've got parking spatial constraints. God forbid we have the rate show with those overhead wires coming down. In which the
noted.
Thank you for your insight on the trolleys, Michael.
Trolley Folly.
Trolley folly. I like it. It rhymes.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah, let me grab.
Well,
Thank you,
great.
John.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. And if you have questions, feel free to email him. Next up, we have a presentation by BSL regarding their use of their public space in their new building. So we'll give them a couple minutes to set up their projector. I saw Brian Downey from BSL was here, and Sarah Alexander from the Architects, and whoever else is here.
Oh, it's
Thank you very much.
I told you, it's revised.
No, I'm just.
Thank you. It never stopped printing.
So Mr. Ferguson is also here. He just flew in from, where'd you come from, Germany?
Germany, how was your trip?
We're in Germany. Where were you in Germany?
Fast.
I love
Very
it.
nice.
I lived in Bremerhaven for 4 years.
A couple decades ago, I was an exchange student in Germany, just outside of Hamburg. Just outside of Hamburg. Lovely area 30 years ago. It's still the area.
Should we dim the lights at all?
I don't think we need to.
Need to dim the lights at all? No.
I think they'll be fine.
And,
We can dim them if you want.
and then let's give
Sarah, do
each
you
of
want
you
the
a
lights
microphone.
dim and off?
Whoever wants to talk.
Here, do you want, here. Want to take my microphone too?
If you don't use microphones, no one at home will hear you.
John? Can you give us your card and the flyer? Or-
Everything all in one place.
Okay.
Yeah, these are like our half pages, chunk handouts with the website as well as our program email
Before you
address.
start.
Sure, yeah, I'll write it down.
No, it's okay. I wrote down your things. You just have one of these.
Thank you.
Oh,
You totally wrote it down wrong.
Can everyone sitting out there sort of see the screen pretty well, or should I turn off the lights, or we good? Okay. Welcome.
Ready to begin? Thank you. Good evening. Brian Downing with Saul Centers. Thank you for this
Can
opportunity.
you hold the microphone?
Hold the microphone.
Well, we're at least tilted up to your face.
How about if I hold it, because I will then hand it off to someone.
Perfect.
Good evening, Brian Downey from Saul Centers. Thank you for this opportunity to come back this evening to present some of our project in more detail, along with an overview of what we discussed when we were here in April. I see some familiar faces. You will recognize much of what you see here. Some new faces tonight. Thank you all for coming. Very quickly to, incidentally, we have on the agenda 45 minutes for this discussion. I imagine our presentation will take around 15 minutes. I hope it will, and then we'll have time for as many questions and answers as we can fit in. And in addition, I have here a handout with 4 images of the center. I guess we could pass them around possibly, if everybody has them. We were here in April. At that time, Sarah Introduction, Sarah Alexander from Torty Gallis and Partners, architectural firm for the project. Sarah is the project architect and associate principal at Torty Gallis. Michael Ferguson Landscape Architects. Michael was not here last time. Much of what you will see in detail tonight is the design of Michael and his firm. Matt Johnson also from Michael Ferguson Landscape Architects. How about if at the end of the presentation I come back and touch on a few other things such as project status and some other questions in specifics that were raised that aren't really related to this at the last meeting, and then we'll go into Q&A. Since April, we have on the specific topic we're here tonight on public space, which is essentially the Connecticut streetscape, we have had a preliminary design review meeting with staff down at DC government. We have been in discussions and in some meetings with staff. We have gotten a lot of feedback from staff. We are scheduled to appear before the Public Space Committee on our application for approval of our Connecticut streetscape design on July 25th. The hearing is on the agenda, which I believe starts at 9 a.m. next Thursday, July 25th. You mentioned FOIA. I think what we have tried to do here between the April meeting and tonight is to keep members of this commission up to date on the comments we've been receiving. We receive comments both about what's on the ground plane, what's visible, and about what's invisible, meaning down below the sidewalk. So we get comments on the vault space, utilities, things like that. What we'll talk about tonight, what I've tried to keep you up to speed on mostly about, are what the public will see on the street. So having said all that, I will turn it over to Sarah, and she will begin the presentation about a broader view, for those who are unfamiliar with it, about the project itself, and then we'll go to the specifics of a public space. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you all hear me? I'm not used to mics.
We're not broadcasting in the room, but that's for people at home.
Right, I got that.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. Didn't know if there's amplification as well. Good evening, everyone. I am going to touch on the big picture, broad, building scale related items, and then Michael's going to follow up with more of the design of the streetscape. So starting off, I believe everyone is familiar with the location of the site. It's on Connecticut Avenue at the intersection of Yuma, just south of Albemarle, on the east-hand side. And one of the most important parts of the site that we've tried to capture in the design is that the park, Soapstone Valley Park, directly to the east of the site, almost touches Connecticut Avenue at this intersection. And so we saw this as an opportunity to give a glimpse or a visual connection to this park that you get in a sequence of other places along Connecticut Avenue. So yet another opportunity for introducing a bit of green to this part of the city. And you'll see that as we move forward into the main points of the design. I would say the existing strip center that's there now has a few items of it that now in our current thinking, for instance, the surface parking, some curb cuts that do not align with the intersection, some retail spaces that are not particularly serving the building as they could, perhaps with street-friendly cafe seating, or some of the proposed uses that we're going to be showing you in our proposed design. So these are just some photos on the screen of what the current site conditions are. Aerial of the existing site. Just to note here, the park, again, behind the site, no visual connection at all whatsoever through the building. You wouldn't know the park was there. Additionally, again, the surface parking lot of the existing building. You can just barely see it. There is a public alley to the south of the site. This is Connecticut Avenue. North is to the left of the screen. On the south side of the site, there is a public alley. That is the only public access our site has, other than Connecticut Avenue, to have any servicing or, access to the site. It is a pretty limited site from that point of view. Our project here, you can start to see, this is a simplification of the ground floor plan. I'll be showing you the ground floor plan in a moment with the spaces outlined. But just a partie diagram, you can see how the building actually breaks At the intersection of Yuma, we've created a visual connection and a sequence of spaces that Michael can outline in more detail, which allow pedestrians and anyone on the Connecticut Avenue to visually glimpse the park. Additionally, I'll move forward with some of the improvements we've done to the streetscape. Here's a view if you're standing south on Connecticut Avenue looking north. The building has a series of pavilions which help break down the scale of the building into a series of smaller massing, allowing it to feel harmonious with and in keeping with the buildings to either side. We are the same height as the building to the south of us, and we are pursuing a by right project. We're not asking for relief from any of the zoning requirements. We've also chosen to use an Art Deco style in keeping with the history of the site and the building that's on the site presently. Here is the view that you will see from the intersection of Yuma Avenue looking east towards the park. And as you can see, we've actually expressed opening through our building, and again, you'll be able to see right into the park and see the changing seasons as they occur. Next, this is a view if you were standing north of the site looking south on Connecticut Avenue. And again, you can see how we've taken a series of lovely pavilions and broken down that 370 feet of frontage into a series of very manageable sizes. And we also created a really nice feature on the midpoint of the block, anchoring the one side of the entry court. This tower piece really as the heart of the center of the project. This is really just to explain some of the complexity of the site. Our project on Connecticut Avenue, you actually enter in on the 6th floor of our building, and then it cascades down the hillside. There's a 50-foot change in grade from Connecticut Avenue down to the bottom of the site at the rear of the site. And the portal that you saw with the opening really opens up onto this raised courtyard that then looks over the park. This is really just to point out again that access from the rear of the site is minimal. Other than squirrels, you're not really going to have much access back there. This is the typical floor plan, really just to allow you to understand how we've broken down the building massing. We have a series of fingers, both projecting into the park and projecting onto the street, again, helping to modulate the size of the building. On the ground floor, we have 10,000 square foot of retail. You'll see it here in the red. All of it we see as neighborhood friendly, cafes if that's appropriate use. I think we've heard from several commissioners cafes or active retail of some sort, shopping destinations. We'll be anchoring the street areas here, and then on either side of our main courtyard we have both the main residential lobby and then the minor south residential lobby. Additionally, if you're coming to this shopping center or shopping area and you need to park, we have provided parking for 30 spaces for the retail patrons, and they'll be able to take a direct access elevator or stair onto the street. All loading and trash pickup, all of that type of stuff will occur inside the building off of the public alley, and as well as parking access will occur off of the public alley entirely within the building. No surface parking. And additionally, we have, let's see, down below here, we have 224 parking spaces, 271 units. I mentioned 10,000 square feet of retail. All of these numbers are exactly what we reported back in April. And then I'll turn it over to Michael to go through the streetscape.
You just advance it. What I love about this project is what Sarah's talked about a good bit, and that's this portal that dramatizes, I think, a beautiful juxtaposition of the urbanity of Connecticut Avenue and the rich diversity of Soapstone Valley Park. The Woodlands is particularly beautiful at this spot, and that portal is really going to dramatize the relationship between the two. So the streetscape, in a lot of ways, has been organized around that idea, the celebration of that, but also very much with an interest in developing a strong sense of continuity, coherence, quality, and animation, both improving the look and the life of the avenue. And it begins with bracketing that portal with a pair of planters on either side and beginning and end on the north and the south. And Connecticut Avenue is, as you've been seeing it along the bottom of the page here, with north to the left. The streetscape's anchored by the preservation of a large red oak there, and then supplemented with a series of 6 new willow oaks in a broad panel of soil, a wider panel of soil that's going to give them a longer life and healthier growth. 6 trees interlaced with a series of new twin Washington globes, new street lamps, and then incorporating a bus stop on the southern end and a rack of bikes at the northern end. That's within a 6-foot wide strip that includes ground cover at the street level. Inside of that is a 10-foot wide clear pedestrian walk north to south. Both of those are paved with the London Walk paver, the standard precast district paver that's 2 feet by 3 feet wide, and that covers the entire paved area in the 16 feet of the walk and the tree zone. Inside of that is an intermittent 3-foot wide boxwood hedge that then defines a retail cafe eating zone between that and the building face. The arrival court is in this location, and I point out that the sidewalk drops at this point, that the driveway is treated as a normal street intersection, a little bit different than we might normally do with an entrance drive because of the signalization at Yuma. It's DOT's strong opinion, and I think it is clear thinking that this get treated more like a street intersection than a normal drive. So there'll be handicap ramps that drop down, cross over, and then come back up. And that is a way to alert a pedestrian to a signalization that could allow a car to come through here. Inside that, there's a drop-off zone or an arrival court that's framed in stone around the perimeter, and then with that is a larger panel, granite, and then inside granite sets that define that area and creates a strong sense of welcome there. On the south side, there are 4 utility vaults that are incorporated into the space between the boxwood hedge and the building face. And if you advance that, you can see what I've described in section from Connecticut Avenue, a 6-foot wide tree planting zone with a healthy soil panel, 10-foot wide sidewalk, 3-foot hedge, and then the eating area, retail area on the inside of that to the face of the building that you see there. You see it in section here. You can see it if you advance in an elevation that looks at the northern end. The arrival court that I talked about is just off the view here. The planter that brackets that there. Strip of ground covers with new street trees, the existing preserved tree you can see in that location, the London Walk pavers, the boxwood hedge, and then the retail area in between that and the building. That's the northern part of the site. If we go to the last slide, you'll see a sketch, the sketch of the south side of the park. All the same configuration that I just talked about, and the only difference, subtle difference you can see, are the utility vaults that are worked into that area between the hedge and the building in that location. So that is all we have to present formally. Would Brian come back up?
I guess I could list these as well as either one of you, but it occurred to me it may help to, just for everybody's benefit, say that some of the I guess principal changes from April's presentation, what you see here in the design would be, and if I leave anything out, let me know. The through sidewalk was 8 feet wide in April. It's now 10 feet wide. The through sidewalk, and I think, in fact, maybe the entire hardscape portion of the zone was presented as red brick pavers in April. It is now a combination of 2 materials, and one is a DC standard, which I believe you call a London paver, 2x3 2 feet by 3 feet in dimension, and that is the through sidewalk, and that is the breaks between the tree panels between the through sidewalk and the street. The area in what is called the cafe zone between the through sidewalk and the building was, as I said, brick, and is now, I guess,
yeah, actually, it's good, Brian. I meant to mention that and didn't. I did mention the London Walk paver in the sidewalk zone. Inside of that, what we're suggesting is a 6 by 8, 6 inches by 8 inches precast paver in the same color and finish as a standard DC London Walk paver, but in a smaller scale. And this is a brick size, and the reason for it is to provide a little more texture there, a little more of a residential feel, and a little diversity, so that we don't have 25 feet or even 35 in that location of extended London Walk pavers, but simply a little variation in the texture of the pavement.
Another change from last time is that you will see a 3-foot hedge in this rendered elevation. Well, that is now with breaks for passage through. That hedge is a consistent hedge line all the way from the north end to the south end. And then one other thing which you do not see here actually is the previous design had a series of, I think, maybe 2 piers on the north end and 2 piers on the south end. They were masonry piers about 10 feet high, capped by a custom and ornamental light fixture. We liked it a lot. I think some folks that saw it in April liked it a lot. There was at least one comment that I remember from the discussion, comment from the audience, that they felt that it made the area look less like streetscape and more like part of our building. Well, I would say that Office of Planning agrees with that position very strongly. And so as a result, they have asked us to remove those from the design, so you no longer see those. Anyway, so I would say those are probably the 5 major changes to the streetscape that come to mind. A lot of it, the rest of it, is really what I'll call fine-tuning to get it just right, because every change we made sets off a series of design dominoes, and then these folks have to figure it out. You wanted to answer that?
Simply that the streetscape does include the DC standard tree fence that runs around 3 sides of those planters.
We are, and I can reiterate this at the end, but as I said before, we are before the Public Space Committee, so part of the reason we're here tonight is to ask the Commission for its support, or maybe more properly for its opinion, and we hope for its support in connection with this. One of the members of the committee itself has indicated that they do want to hear from the ANC, and we're happy to hear from you as well. So we're asking you to register an opinion, and if you would, provide a letter of support, however qualified you feel appropriate, in connection with these package. We will be presenting this package as well as some what I'll call technical drawings that are required as well, civil engineering drawings, things like that, to the Public Space Committee in about 10 days' time. A few other things I want to talk about. I should talk about, for everyone's benefit, there was a request for a building tour which was provided near the end of May, and there were about 10 people from the community that walked through with us. It took maybe, David, I believe you were there, it took, would you think, maybe an hour and a half? We walked from top to bottom of the building, as much as people wanted to see. The building now, the interior at least, the office improvements throughout have all been demolished. It's sitting in basically a shell condition. Exterior finished, but internally it's a shell. Status of the project, we are in discussions with the contractor. We won't make an announcement until we sign a contract. We haven't done that yet. We're working in that direction. We expect to have our demolition permit and our building permit September, October timeframe. And when we get it, we'll proceed. We don't have it yet, though all permit applications are under review and pending. Prior to that time, at the request of the commissioners, and using somewhat the template that Commissioner Gresham provided us, we will have, when we've got the contractor on board, we will have a pre-construction meeting for the community to explain what we will be doing and how we will be going about it. By what we will be doing, I mean how we'll be going about the construction, where it starts, how it proceeds, where they'll stage, how they'll access, things like that. That will not be moderated, so to speak, by me. It'll be moderated by Don Hashey, who in our company will run the construction of this project for us. So he'll take it from there and run that meeting. Other things, let's see. Anticipating some questions, perhaps. The question that came up last time about streetscape maintenance. We will maintain everything we need to maintain. We are happy to maintain the entire streetscape from curb to building front. We fully expect to at least to maintain everything out to that hedgerow. I'm waiting to see what DDOT says is their obligation and what is ours. We are willing to maintain whatever we need to, and I don't mean just removing the snow and pruning the trees and watering things. I mean making sure that it's maintained in a proper condition and repaired. But we may, to some extent, be a backup to DDOT on this because they may have principal responsibility, at least to the hedgerow. Landscaping, just a flag. I'll bring this up. There has been a request that we make available the existing landscaping out in that landscape there, that out there in front right now between the two existing entrances. I guess arrangements are to be worked out. I'm happy to hear from anybody in the community about this. Before we proceed with that, we will be happy to make arrangements. However, if people want to come by, there are some trees, there's some landscaping that would be of some value to people. Perhaps I understand there's a small park nearby that could use a little sprucing out, but I wanted to just, however that may be, we're open to anyone's suggestions. It's there. And I expect that'll be sometime in August or September. A couple of other things. Soapstone Park, I'll put these three under that category. One is there was mention at the last meeting of an odor, a septic odor. I don't know whether it's related to the project that DC Water's planning to undertake. I understand that the community has something going later this week. We're interested as well. I coincidentally got an email from someone recently saying, who do I contact at Saul? I called back and said, call me, and I haven't heard back, so I think they checked that box and moved on. So I'll have to be in touch with them again.
Here, Thursday.
From us and from me.
Yes,
so.
okay.
This room, Thursday.
This room, Thursday, what time?
7:30.
7:30, okay.
Or you can watch it on the internet.
Okay.
And it's very important you come.
And next, there was a question about sound.
But that smell won't be fixed.
Won't be there.
That's
Won't
what
be
they
fixed
said.
then.
We have things to tell you on.
There was a question about sound transmission, and we have looked into that, and we do, in connection with the design, have an acoustical engineer involved just in the acoustics of our building design, but we asked them the questions about sound transmission through the opening that we're introducing in the building, and we asked them the question, I believe, about, or looked into the question about sound transmission due to the HVAC equipment that would be on the top of the building. So I'll let Sarah address that.
Sure. So we spoke with our acoustical engineer about both of those items. The first item, he received the plans of our building, the elevations, all the openings, and as well as a map of the region and the distances. And he said, given the distances and given the other openings nearby, for instance, the alley aperture and the larger gap up at Albemarle, that our small opening would have a negligible effect on any noise in the neighborhood to the east of us. Additionally, the HVAC units that are on the roof are screened by an 18-foot-6 tall wall and open to above, so any noise that would come out would go up and not out. And so he said that also was no concern.
That's great.
Would you say it was an 18-inch wall?
18-foot-6 tall
18
masonry
foot
wall.
Masonry wall.
Masonry with louvers, but they're
Okay.
yeah.
CMU type. Or
The mechanical, it's brick wall. Brick.
It's brick.
Yes.
Okay.
It's set back from the edge 1-to-1, so you can't really see it. The renderings are true, so what you see in the renderings are what you would see, which is pretty much not much.
No CMU on our walls.
No CMU.
No.
Inside.
Maybe, you're right, maybe on the inside, but not on the outside. And the other issue, there was a question about the back of the building, the current back of the building consists of, I guess I might call it, or you might call it, dark spandrel panels and black, actually, with a fair amount of aluminum framing, and then windows. So bands of black spandrel and then windows. And it has the appearance during the day of being very, somewhat muted. So the request was, had we considered looking into darker materials on the back of our building? And Sarah, if you may.
Sure. So I think two things to keep in mind when we look at this. The existing building is 10 foot off the property line and pretty much the entire length of the property straight up. No deviations, no setbacks. Our building, 50% of the building actually steps back, well, the entire part steps back 22 feet. And then additionally, 50% of our rear facade steps back an additional 55 feet. So a lot of the building recedes from your view as in perspective as you're looking towards it. Secondly, we are using a lighter shade brick, and we want to be consistent as we go around the building, but we are using a darker color mullion for the windows, and they will be coated with the typical coating, which is a Solar Band 60, which also helps them in the daytime to recede, and unless the lights are on, they would also recede at night. So we feel that in addition to being more aesthetically pleasing, the rear of the building will also help to fade. Additionally, third item, we have 4 green courtyards. So those green courtyards with their accompanied trees that Michael has designed so well will also help the building to blend into the park.
Sarah, while you're up there, do you want to talk about the irrigation system? Because you didn't mention that.
Sure. So the irrigation system is in all of the planters on the sidewalk area, including the tree zones. So everything should stay nice and healthy.
Great.
Any questions?
I guess so. Let's turn to questions and answers. I just want to say thank you for coming to our meeting, and I would like to say that Saul's been pretty great at setting up meetings with everyone in the community about this project. So thank you for that. I'm pretty pleased to see these plans for the public space. I really like the cafe spaces. I think that's what makes Cleveland Park pretty lively. It makes 14th Street really lively, and hopefully it'll make Van Ness really lively too. I guess let's start with commissioner questions. We can start with David and work our way down. If you want to just ask one question, we'll work our way down, and then we can go back if you have second questions. So, Mary Beth?
You don't, okay, all right. I think it's beautiful. I love it, and I support what you're doing. And we've talked about this before, but I just want to reiterate that we really need your support on this soapstone sewer project. And, I jotted down that you all are celebrating soapstone, and we are too. It's where I walk my dog every day, and I know you want this to stay beautiful. So we need you guys.
That's your question.
That's my question.
Okay, that's your question.
Fair enough. Bob?
Well, I had 4 questions, but I'm only allowed to ask one this time.
Go ahead and ask them, Bob.
No, he can ask one question, and we'll continue working our way down.
You've made the entrance across from Yuma a sort of a central feature. Will people who are driving to the building know not to turn in there? Is there anything visually that tells them not to park there, but to park down the alley?
We will have signage, and there'll also be a porter on staff that will come out promptly and tell them.
Okay, but there isn't any visual design that tells them.
There's a change in paving material. It's not the asphalt of the street continuing. It's narrow. It's 20 feet wide versus the width of the standard street. The delineation of the paving changes into a more residential character. Those are the best. It looks like a driveway. It doesn't look like a street.
Yeah, I'm afraid people are going to look in there to park for the restaurants.
I agree.
They can try, but like I said, Saul will have a full-time porter that opens the door and also tells any cars you are not allowed to park here, and they will deal with them accordingly. And we also have provided the parking down below. So.
Yeah, but I prefer people to go right there instead of going across the sidewalk.
Additionally, there will be signage that will help direct them to the appropriate place to go.
Thanks. Karen, do you have any questions?
I do.
Would you like to ask one of them?
Yes. I might. Just so you know, I know talking about one time putting up some photos of the old things. We found some old photos in the BZA files when we were up there looking at other projects, so we'll be happy to show you, share some of those with you. But my question deals with the Department of Transportation public space thing that they sent us.
Okay.
Because it's stuff we didn't talk about. It mentions in here, in the public space, awnings.
Mhm.
Is that something that wasn't discussed? Are you bringing that to the Public Space Committee tomorrow? And the other thing they mention on here, which we didn't discuss, were bay windows projections into the public space. Is
Sure.
that accurate?
I can address both those. First, to start with the bay windows. The bay windows on our project are actually the pavilions. So these are very large bays, but they meet the requirements of the bay windows. So they project into public space, but they are bay-like.
I guess what I'm asking, the reason I'm asking is, do we need to cover those things in
No.
our resolution?
I don't believe so, because they have not taken any issue with those
Okay,
items.
that's all I'm asking.
So you can, if you support the project in its current design, you would be supporting those features as well.
One thing, it's actually my understanding that DDOT doesn't bring that into the public space so long as the bay projections don't exceed certain, I guess, projections. There are formulas that determine how much, that set how much bay projection you can provide in a building.
I raised it because of what they sent
That's
us.
interesting.
Yeah, they have a
Could be
lot of
beyond.
things in it.
They may note it, but I don't know that they weigh in on it. They just note whether or not it meets the standards. I think that's the case.
I don't know.
We had to check everything that we have in public space. So it's probably just like a box that's checked that we have it.
Okay,
We have bays, we have
I
awnings.
just wanted to ask because of what they sent us.
And so then the awnings, we're showing awnings on the northern side at that one storefront, and we've also showed a few other areas where there'll be vertical projections, just ways to enhance the retail streetscape. And more than likely, the individual retailer will go forward and pursue their own permits for their cafe zone and any awnings that they would like to
They
have.
would have to.
Okay, so
Great.
to be clear, you all are not saying there are awnings there. You're
We
just-
are showing those on our drawings. So they currently, the awnings that you should see here could exist.
Okay.
If the retailer decides they don't want them, they could not provide them. If they decide that the retailer down the way wants awnings, they would have to go separately for that application.
Okay. For reference, how many more questions?
That's all, that was basically mine.
Fair enough. Sally, do you have a question? How many questions
I
do
don't
you
really
have?
have any questions. I would like to make a comment.
You may. You may.
I would like to say that Saul and Tori Gallus, Sarah, and Michael Ferguson have been exemplary in getting me information that I need. I thank you all, especially Brian and Sarah. It's been a privilege to work with you. Usually when I ask for something, I don't get something very quickly, but I have with you all.
Aren't you glad you're not the Capert's project up the street?
I will say this.
What Capert's project?
I like your
Sorry.
project. I think it will be an enhancement to our area. I do hope we'll have hopefully more retail than cafes, but we'll see what you all get, or both. I don't know. Everybody has a thought on this. I think what you've done with going back to the preliminary design review group has probably been very tough and a lot of hair pulling. I like your design. I will say for myself, as being a designer, that I am sad that the light columns have been removed, among some other things. But I know you have to go through the process and you want to get it through public space. I do think you're making the turnaround space, they did give some good suggestions with the curb being put in place. And the different materials are very nice, which I have addressed in the resolution about the public space and the different zones within that public space. Overall, I thank you for changing the red oaks to the willow oaks. I have been in conversation with John Thomas. He has been out of the country like you, so he wasn't real familiar with exactly the spot, but I will be showing him that spot, and he thought that was a good choice. Because I couldn't tell him if it was an American elm or any other type of elm species that you probably wanted. I do have a question, if you all could help us with a possible custom bike rack design to go in front of your building. We are thinking as an ANC maybe design competition to come up with bike racks that denote our Forest Hills, Van Ness area, like they have in Chinatown and other parts in the city. They're very interesting, and this is a way to get creative within our area. I do have one question you mentioned that I want to clarify from my resolution, is that you said in our pre-meeting that it was a 4x8 paver, and now you said it's a 6x8 paver in the public parking area?
I might have misspoken. 4x8 is what I should have
Okay,
said tonight
good.
as
So I
well.
don't have to change that. Thank
in
you.
the cafe area, and Liriope spicata. You had asked about the specific ground cover species, and it's Liriope spicata, and that's what we will use here.
So it's not the big blue, or it is the big?
It's not at the Saul headquarters in Chevy Chase. It's spicata.
Okay. Will DDOT, the urban or public space, allow that? I mean, I want to be sure, because right now they like variegated. They really like variegated Liriope.
I don't know. There's no reason that they shouldn't, but there's no reason. I mean, we probably would have used a big blue had this question not come up. So we're happy with either.
Okay. Well, what
Sally,
they've
the only issue that my understanding
Right, I was
is the
gonna-
only issue they have with the Liriope is they want it 2 feet from the newly planted tree.
They want it 2 feet from the tree.
That's
and
the only
And
one.
they also
They can do
prefer,
that.
which I have a little more information, is they prefer clumping.
Yeah,
They like them
which
12 feet,
the
18 inches apart versus 12. They have some very specific standards.
So we'd be happy to go to the big blue, which is a clumping.
But I guess that's something we can,
We'll sort that out through the
Sort that
process.
out.
Yeah, I think either one will be fine
Will
and
be
very
fine.
good.
That's relatively minor.
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Manoli, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Again, thank you for coming again and for providing as much information as you have and being responsive. I know Commissioner Gresham has sought a lot of information because we've been on the receiving end of it. It's been a lot of information. But it all has been very helpful. But I do have one question. When you were here in the spring, we talked about how we have had this effort ongoing with the Department of Transportation for the capital bike share stations. And from what I'm seeing, there's a tree box and a willow oak where the current one actually is. And from if the rendering is accurate as you say it is, you've, as Commissioner Gresham was just making reference to bike racks, this size here, that's clearly not enough space to accommodate the bike share station now. Is this setting up an issue with capital bike share, with Department of Transportation?
We think not. Those are intended to be individual bike racks rather than bike share. And do you? My understanding is the interest is in relocating the capital bike share closer to the metro.
There is one right next to the metro. Actually, this one.
We actually want to be further from the
We'd like
metro.
to be further, but at the moment, this was deemed to be, it was not optimal, but it was the best location given the circumstances.
And I probably misspoke in talking with Michael about this at one point. I spoke with Chris Holben after the last meeting, and I forgot to mention it earlier in the presentation. The clear sense I got from him, and this was in advance of the PDRM, clear sense, I should say, what he said was that and this is where I'm going to paraphrase, it was the available space, it wasn't the preferred space. And that he said I could say as much if the issue came up during the PDRM meeting, that what he would anticipate doing when the time came is removing it at least from this site, and then trying to find a preferred site for it. And he did talk about putting it further north, as you indicated.
Yeah.
Because,
And
I
we
said,
spent
I said we
good
would
bit of
work.
time
I said we would work with him on that. You know, have we ruled out putting the bike share there? No, my sense is though that that's not where he would like to put it. And what we have done, as you see, is put I think 6 bike racks there.
Yeah.
Then that's not a full bike share rack.
Could it go
But,
more by Nick Cotz's building?
pardon me?
Could the bike share go closer to Nick's building?
I don't know. He didn't say that, and of course I wouldn't volunteer it.
No, but I'm just asking,
But
'cause
I don't
that
know
seems to be-
actually. You mean, well, there is the big tree that I think that box straddles the
tree
property
boxes
line,
get
and then there
larger
is the
with
entrance to
small.
the school. So
There are tree
I'm
boxes
not
there.
sure
No, that was
where.
the only location
Yeah.
on literally from Yuma up to Chesapeake, really.
Even
That
on
was
the
the
other
only
side of the
location.
street? I'm trying to remember.
Both sides of the
what
street, in the street, it was in, we basically went everywhere, so that was and I agree with you, and what he said was true. It was
Yeah.
not the ideal location, but it was the best available location.
The one thing he did not say was that he wants to put it back in place. And I said that we were looking to do something that would put tree panels and things like that there. So I could swing back around with him and touch base with him and, you know, ask him to contact you if you want. However you want to approach that.
We're in touch with them, so we'll
Okay.
we'll engage.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask
Good thing we didn't
Manoli
do
a
a ribbon
question?
cutting there.
Have they just ruled out making a pad, let's say, across from Albemarle, where the bikes could go? Because there is a wide tree line there.
Well, that's maybe a separate discussion for another time, but it's much more complicated than, there are locations, but it would be the equivalent of putting it, in terms of other buildings, it'd be the equivalent of saying, you know, sorry, you don't get your cafe here. We're gonna actually, you know, go into public space on your landscaped zones. There are buildings along the area where public space extends, but
Yeah, like
obviously
in front
that.
of the Albemarle, like,
There was not sufficient space.
Well, the yards go right up, in some sense, the yards go right up to the narrow sidewalk along the street.
what I'm asking is, can
Yeah.
they do paving from the pervious paving, or whatever, from the curb to the current sidewalk, and have the pad for the capital bike share right across the street? I mean, is
I
that
think
something
it's
they
another
do?
conversation.
Yeah, I
It's
think
another-
we
It's
can
a-
figure it out with Manoli and maybe discuss it at a
Okay.
future
You know,
meeting
they
or
still
something
have
like
to go to
that.
public space, so that's step number one.
Right.
Mhm.
But that's a
Um,
thought, is
yeah.
to
But
approach
it's
it
a-
that way, with hopefully maybe you.
It's another
helping us.
conversation.
Yeah,
It's
we'll have
another
this another
conversation.
time.
Right.
So I guess,
Thank you.
Manoli, do you have other questions?
that's it.
No? So I know, Bob, you had a bunch of other
Oh, I do.
questions. Feel free, you may start asking them.
The light post that I see on, what's marked 14 here, it's a north, from the south looking north view. One more, that one. There's a light post there. Are those the kind of lights that you're going to have?
Not precisely that style. It's the Washington standard, the Twin 20. So that is not an accurate depiction. What it will be is the one you recognize as the Washington Globe.
The kind that's all up and down?
Well, it's
No,
the
it's
standard.
not.
I don't know.
We
I mean,
don't
there are
have
none
many.
on the site now, and I don't have a picture of it. But it is the Washington standard. Comes in a single head and a double globe, fluted
that-
column.
Oh, yeah, the
here.
basic problem with those is they point up. They look great when they're off during the day, but at night with the lights on, they're basically shining up instead of down, so you actually get a pool of shadow under them. So hopefully we can work with Public Space or some other group to get a better kind of light that actually points down and not out or up. We want all the lights
We'll
to go
do
down.
that. I mean, there are refractors that do modify the light distribution. It is their standard, the city standard light.
It's one of them. There are many different kinds of lights around this district. Okay, I hate them because they're just light pollution and they don't do what they should do, which is light the sidewalk.
I have to agree with Bob. You know, for safety, the street is what should be illuminated.
But anyway, we will.
But we need to
We can
discuss
talk
it
about
at the public space committee.
Sure. The hedge, how high is that going to be? You said it's
3
3
feet.
feet wide, but is it 3 feet
And
tall?
3 feet tall.
Oh, okay. that's
It'll grow to that and then be clipped at that. It'll go in at about 30 inches.
3 feet is fine. The north tree box on this diagram looks like it's a little wider. Is
Mhm.
that correct?
And that's to keep it as it exists. That's the box around the existing tree.
Tree, okay. So,
So
that's
it's 8
the
feet.
sidewalk is a little narrower there.
It is, that's
Okay.
right.
And I missed the conversation of why you're going to Willow Oaks instead of Red Oaks. Is there what's the
Red
reason?
Oaks have some disease problems, struggle. Willow Oaks don't have that problem. Willow Oaks are well adapted to low areas. We're in a low area here, so just a good, simple, it's a good fit. Good urban tree and a good fit for this particular location.
No,
Right, and that was at our last meeting, John Thomas.
Yeah, but I
addressed
didn't
that.
make it to that meeting. Oh, John Thomas.
John Thomas, and then.
He suggested making a variety of different kinds of trees.
Right, but he said on Connecticut Avenue, because I called him back, and he verified that it was, they prefer willow oaks or a variety of elms.
Princeton American elm.
Well, he's saying American elm, but I think
Yeah,
there's
the
a subspecies or something within the
Princeton.
American elm.
Princeton, yeah.
Varietals.
Varietals, okay. So he
It
was,
is.
he actually was the one that said he
Okay,
recommended.
if that's what he
Because of the blight,
suggests.
and
Okay.
we suggested that at the pre-meeting,
Okay, thank you.
which
Great.
Michael agreed with.
Great. Do commissioners have any other questions? Okay.
Trash cans, they are on the application, but I don't see them anywhere. You
They're
did
not. You-
mention that there were a couple,
So
but
we have-
where are you thinking?
Yeah, we have located 2 at the northern and the southern end of the property.
Okay, so you just have 2 on the site?
Right, one at the beginning and one at the.
And these are the
And
DC
that's-
standard?
That's the district's responsibility for emptying, right?
And then if you have cafes, they'll apply separately and probably have trash cans.
Right.
Okay. Great. Do any people in the audience have questions for BF Saul? Start with sir in the front, and then we'll go to David Bardine, and we'll continue on.
Hi, Ken Terzian. I live in the neighborhood. Walk up and down the sidewalk where you're building. I think it's a nice project.
Can you speak up just a little?
Face the camera.
Well, it's actually facing the screen, so.
I think it's a nice
No, not a
project.
big
I think
deal.
we'll all look forward to
But
having
I'm
it
having
done.
trouble hearing you, that's all.
And I admire your engagement of the community and doing what you're able to do to involve us. I just have a
Can you
quick
talk
question about.
louder? We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
You gotta speak
I have a
up.
quick question about process.
Perfect.
What should we anticipate for construction as far as the work? It might appear that the entire sidewalk's going to be closed for the duration of construction. If that's not the case, can you just give us something that we might anticipate just for expectations?
The construction from start to finish, I may have said last time that I expect it to take around 30 months. The contractor thinks it'll take a little less time, but still some, I'm going to say probably 27, maybe 28. I don't know the exact answer to your question. And that's what we're working through right now. It's one of the things we're working through right now with the contractor, and one of the things we plan to come forward with when we have that, all the construction logistics worked out. All of which will also have to be permitted through the District of Columbia because they will be out in the public space. Just as we need a public space permit for the permanent improvements, we need one to use the public space for construction. I hesitate to say, I do not expect the sidewalk to be closed the entire time. It is our preference as the owner and developer that as much of the sidewalk stay open as long as it can during construction. But at the same time, we have to dig it all up. There's an existing parking deck, and this is the rub, really. There's an existing parking deck that's as long north-south as the existing courtyard. And I don't know, Sarah, if you can get to the, well, there it is right there, okay. You see the portion at the bottom of the screen, the portion of the parking deck that pushes down towards the bottom of the screen? That portion, this button right there, okay. If people can see this green line, that is the property line right there. That's the right-of-way line. By that I mean it's the right-of-way line. Everything this direction is out in the public space. This right here is it's part of the existing parking deck. We're planning to keep that area. It's called a vault space. You are allowed in the district to build vaults in the public space. There's a line item in the budget that was handed out earlier that shows the revenues that the district gets from vault licenses and rentals. We plan to keep it, but it comes out to within, I think, 5 or 6 feet of the curb. And the roof of it's got to come off, and the slabs that go down have to come off, and we've got demolition, then we've got to build it back up again. So that's the tricky time. And we're trying to figure out with the contractor, how you get in, how you get out, how people get through. And that's not really answering your question, but I'm sensitive to the very sensitive to the issues you raise, and we're putting ourselves on the line because we're going to come forward with a community pre-construction meeting to explain just how we think it can work and should work. So that's what I can say for the time being.
Great, thank you. David, you have a question?
I got 2 questions. One about the route run for the 6 Willow Oaks, and the other for this two-way public parking access through the alley on the south side between the building and the Park Connecticut. What will be the route run for these Willow Oaks? Are you going to have some prepared soil rock thing combination so they can go under, the roots can go under parts of the London pavers and maybe even under the cobblestones, or are they just going to be confined to the tree boxes?
It's a good question. What we plan is one continuous planter that wraps up those 2 trees, these 2 as pairs, an extended long one here, and a little bit of a limited one there. So what we're doing is providing about 1,200 cubic feet of soil for these pairs, and I forget the number for that one. What we're not doing is going with an expanded soil panel underneath the sidewalk, but a full soil panel underneath the planted areas and spanning under the paved area there and there. So it's a good provision of soil. That is horticultural soil that will go in at the kinds of compactions that are good for trees. There still is soil available there, but it's not an improved horticultural soil.
Did you consider and reject improving the route run access under the pavers? I find this disappointing compared to what was done on Pennsylvania Avenue the second time around when it succeeded, and done by the National Geographic the second time around when they succeeded. The first time around, of course, they didn't succeed.
We did not necessarily reject it, but my sense is we've got a pretty good ample soil panel here, particularly for the willow oaks, which deal with urban conditions and less than ideal conditions fairly well. So I think they're going to perform well in these locations with this soil.
I guess it's your decision, and I don't know the public space dictates on that. I hope that if it doesn't go well, that you consider redoing it with more. Now, on the parking access, you got two-way parking access through the public alley for hundreds of car spaces. I don't think there's anything like that there now. So I wonder how is Saul going to manage that two-way traffic, parking in and out?
Two buildings.
Correct. So currently there is a garage access on the alley for the Park Connecticut. We will be adding to that for the garage access for our building. Two factors that come to play. One is that the limited access for our site. So this DDOT does prefer that you enter off of a public alley. We have one, so we are. Second, we did perform a traffic study. Grove Slade, our traffic consultant, evaluated our site, evaluated the parameters. What's that?
We don't like them.
They say everything works.
But go on, go on.
It's only a couple
Sorry.
of car delays or seconds delays.
I appreciate that. However, they have evaluated it. It is residential parking. I'd like to mention that residential parking is helpful in that office parking, there is a lot more volume. Residential parking is a little bit of a more, slower amount of trips per day and that kind of thing. So it shouldn't be a huge event.
I think Grove Slade needs to go to an apartment building and see how many cars exit in the morning. Those are your conflict points in the morning.
Sorry.
Well, thanks, Karen. So, Michael, do you have a question about the BF Sol project?
I just want to say, hats off to a job well done, excellent one meeting.
Thank you. Do you have a question about BF Sol?
Yeah, I'm getting to it. Passed up a document I'd like for you to peruse.
Sure.
Very great way. I did have a chat offline with Mr. Downey about affordable housing. I understand by law it's going to be percentage. I'm just thinking about our first responders to have incentives or have our firefighters, police officers here in our area rather than the boroughs elsewhere. Because again, it's a very extremely expensive jurisdiction, and we're talking about affordable housing. This is where it begins.
I agree. I hope some.
And we are providing the required affordable housing. It's called inclusionary zoning. And I think it was intended exactly for that purpose. So
Do you know how many units?
8% of the units.
That's great. Does anyone else in the audience?
Let's just think about bumping that up a bit.
Anyone else have a question? Do any commissioners have one more question? Otherwise, we can talk about a resolution if someone wants to introduce one. Sally?
Could you tell me a little bit about the stormwater runoff vaults that are mentioned in the garage?
They're not there anymore.
They're not there anymore.
Since our previous meeting, the stormwater vaults, they still exist. We still have them. We didn't get rid of them, but they used to be in the public space in the garage vault. It was raised that was not an acceptable use of the garage vault, so they are now moving to be under our loading dock.
Okay, but they're still there.
We still have them. They're
And
just
they're
no
still-
longer.
and they still
They're
are
not in the
going to
public
accept
space
water.
anymore. And they're still going to accept water. They're still going to do their job identical to how they would have done it before. They're just not in the public space anymore.
Okay. And I would like to say that we do need your support with our involvement, at least with the sewer project, because this building is looking back at Soapstone Park. that
Sally, we move on. because
Thousands
we've
of
talked
trees.
about that already.
I know, but I want to bring up that if you come to the meeting, there is a proposal to bring the sewer line down through the alley that you're talking about, the public alley from Connecticut down into Soapstone Park. If they do the horizontal drilling method, it's only an if, but they are considering that as an option versus coming down Albemarle Street.
Interesting.
So-
So we'll discuss that more in
Yeah.
a meeting with WASA on Thursday in the same exact room or on the
Right.
internet. So Sally, do we have a resolution about this?
I do.
Would you like to present it?
Do I need to read it all?
No, we could tell the public about what's in it and what you want to do.
Okay, first we outline what the project is. Then we go into that you have been to public space, initial filing, and you've been through PDRM meetings. You have come to this meeting to notify the public and us of your presentation. I have listed what you presented tonight as far as the willow oaks, the elm tree, planted, under planting with iron fencing, standard DC fencing. I mentioned the big blue liripe, but again, we'll, I guess, discuss that, and the twin Washington Globe street lights at the end of each box. I talk about in fairly a lot of detail about the pavers. I also have done a drawing that all of the commissioners have in their packet with the resolution. I refer to the public space area, which is from the curb line to the face of the building, and it's divided into 3 areas. The tree box furnishings area, which you all have at 6 feet, and then the sidewalk area, which is the number 2 area, which is at 10 feet now, and then the remaining proposed retail sidewalk cafe area, including the special pavers, 4x8 pavers, as the 3 zone, which is the public parking area. That is how they define it in the Design Realm Handbook, Public Design Realm Handbook. And I have made that notation all through the resolution so that we're clear about it. I've talked about the utility vaults, how they're paved. I put in that there was 6 standard bicycle racks in the public space circulation area, and again called out the special paving in the public parking area, being the small precast paver in the retail sidewalk space, cafe space, and then at the turnaround entrance driveway being the granite and the cobblestone, which I think is important and which you all have gone over several times with us. I will read, now therefore be it resolved that ANC 3F supports the public space application for Park Van Ness, DDOT tracking number 82330, and emphasizes its support for 3 specific areas of the design, provided Saul subsidiaries sign a covenant with DDOT for the maintenance of the special paving materials. Number 1, the curb cut at Yuma Street, which is essential to help minimize any traffic disruptions as a result of residential and retail drop-offs and pickups. Number 2, the use of special pavers in the public space between the 10-foot sidewalk area and the building face is a good way to define the sidewalk from the public parking area. And number 3, the paving design at the entry turnaround that extends through the public parking area to the back of the sidewalk is shown on the design drawings dated July 16th to maintain the integrity of the paving design. Be it further resolved that ANC 3F recommends simplifying the current DC standard tree fence and design by eliminating the top portion of the O and the horizontal mid-bar elements while keeping the materials, metal bar sizes, and installation the same as the DC standard. Be it also further resolved that ANC 3F strongly urges all subsidiary to support an installation of a capital bike share station on the public space area if deemed feasible by DDOT and the capital bike share for the use of the community and Park Van Ness residents. Is there anything else?
The last.
You want me to say this last one?
Yeah.
Be it further resolved that Commissioner Sally W. Gresham and anyone else, Karen?
I'll go.
Or Mary Beth?
Sure.
Okay, anyone else? And represent ANC 3F at the Public Space Committee hearing on the project. I did not list a date because we didn't have a confirmed date until tonight, which now we can.
Great, so
I
the
second
resolution
the
is seconded by Mary Beth. Is there discussion? We can start with Manoli and work our way down if you have any discussion items. No? Karen?
I do.
Yep.
We're on the page 2, where we talk about maintenance of special paving materials, and this might be a question for BF Sol. Do you also have to sign a maintenance agreement for the hedges and planter boxes that are on public space? Because anything, I know anything that's different from their normal, supposedly you do.
So that means all the plant material then? That means in the boxes, that means the hedge,
Well, I'm saying the hedge and the planter
and the
boxes.
tree boxes.
Well, I don't know about the tree boxes because they're street trees, so I don't know that answer.
I can say something to that after talking to John Thomas. He said that the city takes care of the trees and that the property owner takes care of the underplanting.
And the irrigation system, DDOT doesn't take care of that. That's
No.
why I'm raising it.
No. And
And
he
if they
did,
don't take care of the Lariaby.
no, he said, right.
So I guess that's why I'm raising the question. As to whether we should just say for maintenance of the special paving materials or for maintenance of all special materials or something, just take out,
I guess we will sign the agreement to maintain whatever we need to sign to maintain. And, Michael was saying to me here that it's his understanding that we would be expected to maintain the ground cover, the edges, and so forth, et cetera, et cetera.
The owner would be required to keep the hedge at 3 feet above our.
Yeah, because that's the DC standard.
We don't expect DDOT to maintain the irrigation.
No, I
We go
don't
in
think you
knowing
did, and
that,
I
yeah.
trust you because I've known you for a long time.
And they won't, so.
Yeah,
I'm just
so-
questioning whether we should write this signature that way or just say that BF Sol has agreed to maintain,
You want to say
The
special
non-DC
paving materials and
I think we can work on that.
softscape materials?
And something, I think we need to.
How about a friendly amendment, the special paving and plant materials?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that works.
yeah.
That's why I raised it.
I will ask the question
Irrigation
on
and
the
plant
irrigation that Karen brought up. When I was talking to John Thomas, he his eyebrows went up on the irrigation. Did you all get any feedback in your PDRM meetings about the irrigation of the tree boxes, not your planters near the building?
We have it, Sally, on our property.
You do? Because I don't know why he raised.
It might have come up, but I don't recall any issue.
Why
Okay,
don't we
there's-
just say for the maintenance of the special, what'd you say,
Special
paving?
paving and plant materials?
And what about paving, irrigation, and plant materials?
Yeah.
That covers everything.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
My second thing, I would like to see us add another resolved, or maybe put it into the be it further resolved that's there, to change the Washington Globe to a different light fixture. Where we mentioned changing the fence. I would like to see us say that we would prefer something other that shines down on the street or whatever,
Let's not get too specific about that.
because otherwise they will approve the Washington Globe.
Is this light in your picture a specific one that you want, or just generic?
No, but I'm just saying the
I'm just
reason
asking.
That was the attempt of the renderer to depict the Washington Globe.
Okay.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is on page 1 of this, we say that it's Washington
Yeah,
Globe.
I spell it out.
It's spelled out, and maybe we should take it out or do something if we don't like the Washington Globe.
I don't know the names of the better ones. I would take out the specific name of the
What
light.
about just leaving it with them with twin streetlights or something? Or with
with-
streetlights?
How about Wood Street Light?
With streetlights.
Well, wait a minute.
Twin
Would
Washington,
there be a better
just,
name than twin or streetlight,
I-
something a little more?
I'm suggesting strike Twin Washington Globe, so it just says Wood Street Lights at the end of each tree box, without getting into the specifics of what kind.
And is
Well,
still-
I know I've
I-
seen the twin streetlights.
and I don't feel
in
strongly
quite a
about it.
few recent areas. One is Glover Park, where they redid that whole area.
And they don't like them.
And then there was another area, I think 8th Street has them.
You
There's
know,
quite a few areas that have them.
that doesn't mean we have to.
No, but what are our options?
There are a number of other kinds. In downtown, in Adams Morgan, they've started using some that look like wrought iron, but they face
And the
down.
balls are down.
Yeah.
Yeah, face down.
Do you know what he's talking about? The ones, the balls are kind of down in a frame?
They're not great, but they're better.
Can we do this? We can just say streetlights for now, and before the Public Space Committee meeting, can you come up with one so that we can recommend it?
I will get the
Not necessarily you, Bob, but, you know, even.
I will
somebody.
get some.
Yes, I'll look through the other standards. I mean, I think the important thing is that your region, Van Ness area, uses one standard.
Right, and that's,
But the
Mary
other,
Beth, you
But
and
we
I
can
need to-
change the standard we have.
Excuse me?
We can change the standard.
We actually don't.
Yeah.
We
have
actually,
a-
right now, we have some of those big
We have the Cobra
highway
heads
things that
and-
are.
Right now on site
We do
is
not
just the
have a
Cobra
very
head.
good
you know,
standard.
I think, I'm not saying we shouldn't have a standard, but I don't know when all of them were gonna be replaced. And I would rather see them replaced with something we like than something that we don't like. Because all of the buildings that are on Connecticut Avenue are not gonna run out and change their streetlights now.
No, we're gonna have to work on that with
Yeah,
them.
but I'm just saying, so we need to, just, you know, we need to find
Next month.
something that works for us, not for Glover Park.
Well, I think we'll need to look at some designs and figure it out.
Yes.
I don't know that we're going to answer that question here.
Do we
No,
want
we
to
already-
write in here to be selected with the architect?
I wouldn't
Why
be,
don't we?
you don't have to
why
get
don't we
that
say something,
specific.
Maybe just say, light fixtures, to be determined, but
Determined.
which provide, ample illumination to the sidewalk below, something like that.
Well, Adam just made a face, but this is the kind I'm talking about.
It's okay. She made one too.
The old-fashioned kind,
The
and I like
old-fashioned.
Well,
it.
they're actually new, but yeah.
So I think, Sal, is that
Why don't we say
language-
with to be determined streetlights?
Which is a plus.
Yeah, and just say, you know, that,
With to be determined
that hopefully
streetlights approved by the
cast
ANC.
additional illumination onto the sidewalk or something like that, just so we get a message across. I mean, there's no point in even mentioning it if we're not gonna make our point, and our point is, we want additional illumination, right?
And we
On the
want it
street.
facing down.
On the,
But we want it
On
down,
the
and want a
sidewalk.
nice
Yeah.
looking fixture, I would assume.
Okay, so I think we should add,
I think we
if
need
you're
to be,
amenable to it, we'll just add that generic language he said, and we'll figure it out with everyone, because we don't know the names right now.
we don't.
And I
So-
think they're gonna look, and maybe we'll have
Well,
something before the
maybe
Public
they'll
Space
email
Committee.
us in a couple days
Modify
with
this
a
once we
couple
get something from them?
No,
No.
why
No,
don't we,
we'll just keep it
we're
generic,
just
and
gonna
then we
keep
can
it generic, and then
follow
at the
along
Public
later.
Space Committee, we can
Okay,
recommend something.
that's fine. So what are we writing from here?
We also want to
Can
make,
you repeat what you were saying, Maribel?
well, I would say just say, in the whereas, I would just say with streetlights at the ends of each tree box. And then when you come down to your be it further resolved,
Yeah.
after the tree box, I would add, you know, something about, let's say ANC 3F recommends, you know, DDOT approved lights that cast ample illumination onto the sidewalk.
without, well, see, part of the thing I'm concerned about, I mean, there's light pollution, but we're in a city, so, but there's also light that goes onto the sides and in people's windows.
Right.
And we really want to make sure that the light goes down and not out. I used to live in an apartment that had one of the globes across from me. I was on the second floor, and it just shined in. It was terrible. But something that goes down is a big plus.
You know,
Okay.
I think between now and Public Space, we ought to be able to come up with something.
I'll come up with,
I'll get better design.
So I think
I think
if we
between
include the generic language,
a
and then
generic-
we can all
Okay.
chat and maybe show them some things that we think are nice, we can probably figure out something. Are there any other changes to?
One other question. Are we now still using Big Blue Liriope? I thought I heard you say you were using something else.
That's what I would suggest, and we'll work that out. Yeah, I said either, I think, is a good solution, and if the district feels strongly on the clumping type, which is, one type is Big Blue.
And now there's a variegated,
variegated is another choice.
Yes.
Why don't we just say Liriope?
So let's
Take out the word Big
Take
Blue.
out Big Blue.
I have one.
Bob, do you have an edit to the resolution?
In the fifth whereas, which is right above the blue Liriope, we say public bike storage, and I believe in DDOT language, storage means something slightly different, and what we mean in DDOT language is bicycle racks, not storage. So can we change the word storage to racks?
Sure.
Thank you. Do we need the word public? Can we just say bicycle racks?
No, we need public because of the station.
I don't think public matters because we're talking about the public space.
Okay, so you wanted to say bike racks?
That's fine.
Or how about individual bike racks?
How just bike racks?
Bike racks is fine.
Bob, do you have any other edits?
That was it.
Yeah, I do.
Mary Beth, do you have any edits?
I wasn't finished.
Well, you'll wait a second. Mary Beth, do you have anything?
No.
David, do you have anything? Karen?
Should the whereas on the capital bike share be in there at this point?
Which number is that?
It's
Yeah.
the be it further resolved.
Be it further resolved.
Second.
I mean, we can add whatever we want on bike share. It's not particularly relevant to this hearing, but.
And it's not relevant at all to the public space hearing. That's why I'm asking if we should not just take that out for now, that paragraph, because it has nothing to do with the public space hearing.
But we've also put, if feasible.
I'm just saying it has nothing to do with this, though.
But but it's put on the public space.
But you don't know where it's going to be. That's what I'm saying. It might not be. It has nothing to do with their design right now. We're going to public space for this design. This design does not have the bike share. According to what Mr. Downey said, it might not be on their property. And I guess what I'm.
Appears to be the direction that.
So I don't think.
I'm for keeping it and letting the Public Space Committee decide whether they're going to have it there or not. But I don't think there's any space under the current design. If they want to add the bike share station, they're going to have to change the design a bit. But I think we should at least mention that we want it. Not necessarily.
It says strongly.
The way it
urges.
is fine.
I mean, we can say urges. We can take it strongly out.
I would take the word strongly out of
Okay.
this because.
Yeah, strongly is.
Okay.
I don't like strongly at all, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I don't.
Urges to support. To support. I mean, that's pretty generic.
Okay. Anyone else?
Or do you want
Why
to
don't we
say
just-
work
Urges.
with?
However you want to phrase
Why
that.
don't we just make it a little more generic that says that we urge Saul subsidiary to work with Capital Bike Share, if feasible, to locate a Capital Bike Share or something. Make it a little. David had his hand up. Bardine, maybe he has that wording.
What?
You have wording, David?
David, do you have wording on bike share?
Does the whereas identify the tree that's to be preserved as an elm or an oak?
It's an oak.
It's an elm. It is an American elm by what I have gotten
The
from
presentation tonight
UFA.
said it was a red oak, so could you just make sure?
Is it a red oak or an elm?
It's a red oak.
Okay.
Okay.
We will fix that.
'Cause-
Existing one large red oak in
'cause I've been told it was an elm.
sixth one, whereas
Big
clause.
difference.
And wait a minute. in the thing
It's a
that you
whereas
used,
clause, it has no legal significance.
UFA.
Anyway,
Wait a minute. Wait a second.
Wait a minute. That's what Sharon said. I got it from her. I mean,
Stanley, you take it
Just
back?
say one large tree.
it's true.
are we sure it's a red oak? Because they told me from UFA it was
You
an elm.
seem very confident. I guess, Sally, we will.
Just say
Okay.
large tree.
We
fine.
can correct
Here,
it
Sally.
afterwards
This
with
is
the
all
proper
we
one.
can do.
Anyway,
Bike share, it's red oak.
okay.
A tree is a tree.
A tree.
Okay.
Do a tree.
So is there anyone,
that?
does
So
anyone
the
else
roses
have
are
any,
rose?
does anyone else have any revisions to this on the ANC commissioners? No. Does anyone in the audience have any comments on that? David, do you have any comments? Guess not.
You understand, I'm disappointed on the route run, and I hope these, the family
Sally, you have to put in there a quorum being four.
future projects
I
in
copied
our
it.
neighborhood
Ask him.
require
He told me that's what I was supposed to put.
part of the process.
David, I've spent hours on the phone with Urban Forestry and Casey Trees, and they recommended the willow oak.
I have no objection to Willow Oak.
He's talking about the,
I guess,
I call for the question.
Adam, this
I
has to don't-
Go
say,
bigger if you had a bigger
all the
route run with
resolutions
prepared
have to say
soil.
that your quorum,
yeah.
a quorum of four.
I'm asking you to
He,
change
no,
that.
Sally, he's saying it has to say the quorum.
That,
Well, since that's not about changing this.
No, that's fine. We'll think about that in the future. Okay, so Manoli has asked a call question. Can we all vote on this?
Could I?
You may,
If I
Brian.
may.
Yes.
Sarah brought to my attention, I may have missed this, one of the, I guess, qualifications or specific points made was to preserve, she thought it said for parking for both residential and retail. Or access or drop-off, rather, pardon me.
It's residential only.
Yeah, the intent is that that only be for residential,
In the,
Is that in our
in the
resolution?
support?
in the
I
entry
said the pavement
court.
design at the entry turnaround, I didn't say anything about.
You said at the curb cut, you started off with
The
you
number
support
one, the curb cut at Yuma Street, which is essential to help minimize any
retail
traffic
drop-off.
disruption
And
as a result of
retail
residential
drop-offs.
and
I didn't
retail
say retail.
drop-offs.
Retail drop-off, it's residential drop-off.
We're only planning, yes, we're only planning residential drop-offs there.
Okay,
So if we could take out "and retail."
that's fine.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So,
And one other correction, because this has to say ANC approves this resolution, which was properly noticed, at which a quorum being four has to be in there.
Yeah.
I've been
Being
told.
four,
Yes, that
Okay.
has to be in our resolutions.
Yes.
being four, okay.
okay.
Well, Gottlieb, yes?
Yeah, I gotta ask, because I've
Do
seen
we have to
every
say
kind of
in the
thing.
resolution how big a quorum is?
I don't think we should.
Yes.
It doesn't hurt to put it in, though.
But we don't have to change this last page, which has the signature.
But we're gonna change other things, so
I
the
might as well
signature might
change
not
it.
be the last page.
It's always the last.
So it's always the last page. Let's not change it here, and for the
I think
future, we
we'll
can
just-
add
We'll
it.
just change it for the future. But anyway, okay, so all in favor of that revised resolution
Okay.
offered by Sally, which will help her revise with David's notes. All in favor of that, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye, approve unanimously, 700.
Keep breaking your pen.
Sally, here's the signed one. Thank you, BF Soft,
Can I ask
coming to our
a
meeting.
quickie?
No, you
Isn't
can't.
DC
Karen, you can't. You
I am
can
going
ask-
to anyway.
Karen, you can ask later.
Isn't
Karen, you can ask later.
Isn't
We have
D-
to move on to the next thing, Karen.
Thank you.
Sorry. So next item, because it's
Thank
getting
you
late,
all for coming.
Are we using
Is-
rubberized sidewalks now in some areas to
is
protect tree roots?
approval of amendments to grant making procedures and the first reading of grants related bylaw. Manoli, would you like to discuss?
Bring it up Thursday, Karen.
No, that's not. Okay, so this is amendments to the groundmaking procedures. So we had a discussion last month, and there was some question about some of the items. Went back and we reworked a few, struck some, kept a couple. So first with the guidelines, they're minimal changes now. And we'll explain why in a moment. Changes, rather than focusing on particular categories, the idea is that we can do that. That doesn't need to be written into the guidelines. If we so choose to say, to go out to the community and say, we are particularly emphasizing arts and cultural education and neighborhood beautification this cycle. We are able to do that. That doesn't necessarily need to be in the guidelines. We can just do that as the decision of the commission.
And if I'm not mistaken, we said actually, we did that so that it wouldn't discourage somebody from filing one.
No, it doesn't discourage anybody, but we also can, if we so choose, say, this cycle we want to really focus on these types of, and I think that helps, leads into the marketing question, like, you know, how we target some of the marketing and so forth. The next is at number 7. Actually says now, for more than $1,000 must seek additional sources of funding, which is quite a change from the original proposal, which was to not seek additional funding. But this is something that I think is open to discussion. But that's where the language is right now. 13, it still has this range, but has language in there that we can consider a larger amount for projects meriting additional support. And then us is number 17, and this is what I understand is okay. So if a grantee requires an extension to file a report, the grantee must submit a request for the extension in writing. Email is acceptable prior to the expiration of 60 days. The grant committee will review the request and approve or deny the request within 10 days of the receipt of a request. The extension request should be for no more than 30 days. The committee will make a report of the extension available to the public on the commission website by a formal announcement during the next duly noticed commission meeting. And this is in accordance with direction that was provided by the Office of the ANCs. That was language that came from the Attorney General.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, didn't bring that documentation, but we can provide that documentation.
I think that's.
Commissioner Summersgill has it, and that's almost word for word.
I believe that's word for word, if memory serves, but you know, it's been.
So this is those are the sort of limited guidelines.
Gottlieb, is that accurate? Gottlieb?
Yes, it is. It came from him.
Excuse me?
Yes, it is.
Information that came from you, is it accurate?
I guess the information, I guess the question, no, I didn't know where it came from, because you said Attorney General.
It was, the Attorney General was coming, it was a
You're
letter from the
allowed to
Attorney
have
General that
extensions
was
of the
relayed.
60-day grants. You don't have to give us you're allowed to have an extension, even though the act says within 60 days following the issuance of a grant, they shall give us a statement of the use of the funds. They can request extensions. They don't have to use it.
It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. I can give you a copy, but it's fine.
It's fine.
We're yes. What we received from Gottlieb was a statement from the Attorney General. Yes, I believe it was sent, but Bob can send it.
It wasn't, I never saw it.
Maybe it didn't get to you.
Is that accurate, Gottlieb? You're not answering me.
Well, he doesn't have it in front of him.
I'm just asking if he sent it out,
He
then.
hasn't been listening.
Oh, well, then he needs to listen.
I mean, you keep asking him, but he
I just want to make sure if we're doing this.
see, he doesn't have anything.
This was from which one? From the Attorney General. You related to us. Okay. There had been a Attorney General essentially has explained that the 60 days is a more fluid number than it seems on the face of it. Is what it boils down to.
And this
people-
provides some bounds on that, while still allowing for it to be fluid. Okay.
And Bob's going to send a ruling.
Yeah, sure. It's, you know, we had a grantee 2 years ago now that was, just a year ago, that was, took more than 9 months to actually get the information to us. So it's really, can we get in under the auditor's deadline?
No, I'm
With
the
a
one
little
who-
begging and
if you
pleading
remember
like we did.
correctly, I'm the one who said we could have the extensions originally, but I
So-
just never saw it in writing.
Well, now it's in writing. And on the grant application, the only additional is we actually apparently did not, for number 5, we had this line, does the applicant have other sources of funding for the activity which the applicant seeks a grant from ANC 3F? It says yes or no, which the issue was really they were supposed to be seeking. So now it asked for the form.
Oh, the
Just asked for a statement of attempts to information on co-sponsoring organizations.
That's fine.
And that is it. Still, the other elements of actually going out and trying to engage the community are all still valid about developing a list of relevant organizations and doing a little bit of outreach. Still plan to do. I've got a couple weeks vacation coming up, so I'll spend my vacation.
I thought we had said we weren't going to supply applicants with a list of organizations that might fund their projects.
We're not. That's not what
Oh,
was the intention. No,
well,
the intention is eligible 501c3s in our commission that we may do some outreach to make sure that they're aware of the grants program.
Oh, okay, I
That's
didn't
it.
understand what you
No.
were saying.
No, not looking for shell 501c3s to do. No. Okay. So I submit these, I don't know if we need to vote on them, but.
Yeah,
okay.
we should vote on it.
I submit these for adoption.
I'll second it.
All right.
I second it.
Anyone have any comments at all additionally? Nope. Okay, let's just vote on adopting these. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
7-0-0.
I believe technically we have to come back for the bylaw amendments next
Well, I'm
meeting.
gonna read so this is the, this is the.
Are you doing this separately?
Yeah, I'll do it separately.
Okay.
For the bylaw amendments, there are 2 amendments to the bylaws. The original text is in this top line where it says original text. The proposed new text just strikes that first sentence. Commissioner Perry has raised some question about some of the language in the rest of that, but for the time being, I do not want to take on the issue of whether or not clearly identified needs is good language. I think that's something we can revisit at another time. That was not the intent for this. This is the language as it stands now. All I'm proposing is to strike that first sentence, grants should be awarded on a one-time basis for specific community projects. That really is a guideline that by having it in the bylaws, it's something that it's prescribing as with more specificity than the bylaws should, I think the bylaws should contain, and also proposing additional new text. The commission may vote to waive any element of guidelines for specific projects provided, that should be provided. The waiver does not conflict with federal DC law or directions from the DC auditor or attorney general.
Great.
I just had a question. I agree with your bylaw, but amendment. Did we want to go on and amend the other bylaws that we
ready?
identified as having typos?
Are you ready to right now?
No.
Let's bring them up next meeting.
Okay.
So there you go. That's the first.
But it was a good list, but
That's
you don't have it in
list.
front of us.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of us.
So
We
there
can
is
take
the
care of that.
first reading of the proposed bylaws.
Perfect.
Amendment.
Thank
Do
you.
I don't think, Mary Beth, I mean, it's a typo and stuff, I think we can just correct it. I don't think we have to,
I don't think so, Karen, because some of it is interpretive.
okay, interpretive, okay.
We can-
But there's a range of things, so we can.
We can read it next meeting. I don't think any of it's material
The
that we have to
the only
change.
thing I was questioning in here, and it's been in our bylaws, I just probably never read them, or read through them, for was what does it mean, or a segment of the residents with clearly identified needs? I'm not sure what that really.
I don't know. Maybe we can do some research and
Figure
figure
out
it
what-
out, or
yeah.
otherwise we can interpret as we wish. Okay.
But
Interesting.
we actually have to vote twice on the bylaws. So I second the amendments to the bylaws.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh, I seconded them.
Yeah, we do have to do the.
But they
votes
come
on both
separate
readings.
from the other thing. So
Oh,
that
okay.
we have to vote on this now and then again at our next meeting.
Okay. So, all in favor of this deletion and addition?
Aye.
Say aye. 700.
Great.
All right. Next topic, marketing plan to market grant opportunities for ANC 3F's grants to the public. So, I quickly made up a proposal. I did not circulate it to all you. I'll just read it. I was thinking twice a year we would do the following. We would advertise in all of the local listservs, including paying the Cleveland Park listserv to put a paid ad because they want a paid ad. We'll do that over the course of every other week for 3 weeks.
What does that cost?
That's $150 bucks.
For the, it's 150 for
No,
the three.
50 each. 50
Okay.
each. I was Manoli recommended we get some trifold brochures that we could hand out to organizations or whatever else we want to do that, and that was $300. $300. And then we talked about last time when we talked about this briefly, doing ads in the Current. So I would be inclined to do 6 weeks of page ads in the Current, which is approximately $17.50, I think.
Why do we need 6 weeks?
Just a good.
Why not, to me.
3 weeks, 2 times a year.
3 weeks, 2 times, yeah, I mean,
Right, that's what we're talking about, right? Twice a year?
No, I was going to say this twice a year.
Oh, that whole thing twice a year.
Yes.
I'd like to see us limit that a little bit.
Well,
I-
I'll propose it, then we can discuss in a
Okay.
second. So that's $1,728. So basically, the total amount there would be, let's just say $2,300 twice a year for the marketing. That will give us flexibility for its change or something like that. So that's $4,600 a year. So that is what I'm proposing, a resolution. So discussion. Karen, you have thoughts?
I do. I have a problem with spending that kind of money on marketing for grants. No other ANC does it. I don't have a problem with advertising in the Northwest Current. I don't think it needs to be 6 weeks. If, somebody's in the month, you can space it out every other week for a month or something, which gives you, maybe 4 times. But I think to spend $4,600 of taxpayer money on advertising when we could be using it for grants is ridiculous. And I don't think we should be paying the Cleveland Park listserv. Because everybody, why, I really don't, for an ad. We post on their list, they post on the Forest Hills list, there's the Tenley Town list, there's all these lists.
No, so that would be part of, those are free, so we don't obviously have to pay
But I
for
don't
those.
think we should pay Cleveland Park.
Well, then they won't post it, so, I
Well,
mean,
and then if they don't
but
post
I
it, they don't,
think-
people read the Northwest Current.
they do, and there are also 15,000 people on the Cleveland Park listserv, so that's a lot of people.
But how much of Cleveland Park listserv, how many of our residents actually read the Cleveland Park listserv?
I think lots.
And
but-
I'm not sure what this trifold brochure is gonna do and who it's gonna get passed out to or what it's gonna say.
That was Manoli's idea, so I'll defer to him to speak.
It would have information about the grants. What it is, so I'm doing things like speaking at in this space, at least twice, annual meetings of buildings in my SND. And it would be very nice to be able to have something to leave behind, because I have had questions. And right now, the response is, well, you can find some information on the website, but it's really just this. So part of this, we need to, as part of our sprucing up the website, this is a big piece of sprucing up the website. So that's legitimate. This is not a recurring cost as well. I think this is a one-time, maybe every 3 years or so, because we're talking about somewhere in the range of, I priced it out at about 400. That this is something where we'll replenish it when necessary. But I think from a outreach to be able to have something that has basic information as a leave behind, when we are speaking to groups, for those of us who do go and speak to some of the groups in our community, to have some more information about, as does a speaker when they arrive here.
So I have two questions. Who is the target group that you would send this to, or give it to, other than when you go to speak at the board meetings at the apartments, or to merge, or to the schools? I mean, there's got to be a target list.
I guess
then,
okay.
Well, so
I think
for
to me,
instance, if we are
how
doing
can
the
an
outreach to the
apartment, but an
organizations.
apartment building, the residents of an apartment building they aren't going to be applying for our grants. Because that doesn't benefit a majority of the residents.
But they could be part of an organization.
Well, if they're
most people,
but
lots of people
I'm
are
just-
nonprofits in your building. I mean,
are we targeting people like Rock Creek Conservancy?
I mean, I'm not sure where, I guess that's my problem. I think this is.
I think an informational brochure is a great idea.
That's a great idea.
Especially since it's a one-time cost.
I don't have a problem with the 400 now that I know it's every
So,
couple of years.
what I'm inclined to
It's
do
not
at
in
this point
everything.
is cancel my resolution, or whatever the proper word is to do that. And what I'm going to first do is propose that we budget $300 for a trifold brochure,
That I have
just
no
to get
problem
that. So, is there any discussion
Well,
on?
Manoli just said 400,
How much
so.
No, I meant 400 actual brochures.
Oh, for $300.
It was, I'll have to pull up the numbers, but it was somewhere along
less. It was
those ranges.
less.
Why
Because
don't we
they're
do an
like,
allowance, like
So
$100, so that it's a round number?
I'm proposing we just do $300, and whatever he spends under that, great.
I think that, no, I don't have a problem with that now that I know it's
Okay.
not
Does anyone
a
have
every 6 months charge.
Does anyone
How
else
about
have
the
a comment on
designs?
$300 for
Pro bono?
trifold brochures?
Not on the trifold
but
brochure,
I'll
so.
send the design around.
That's nice.
and
Yeah,
we'll-
well,
Yeah.
perfect.
that's
All right,
No,
so
I think that's fine. That's
all in favor of $300 for trifold brochures, vote aye.
Aye.
700. Okay, so next issue. How much do you want to spend to promote grants, if anything at all? So I'll just go down the line. What are you comfortable with? Manoli, do you have a number that you're comfortable with?
I don't have a number that I'm comfortable with, but I was,
So we'll-
6-week lead did seem.
Okay.
Be perhaps to be on the high end. The 3-week lead, a couple times a year seemed reasonable. That said, if deemed, I would be open to a longer lead period.
Are we talking about in addition to the $300 on
Yes.
the trifold?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Sally, do you have any thoughts of how
What
much
does this cover? What is?
it would be? Ads in listservs
Ads,
or the
yeah.
print newspaper saying, "Please apply for a grant, so we can give you money." It's basically what it would say.
Okay.
Karen, do you have any thoughts on this?
I would like to see us, I don't have a problem with 1 or 2 ads in the Cleveland Park listserv. I think we don't need necessarily 3. If they're $50 a piece, why don't we try a couple of things? We can always go back and add. Why don't we see what happens the first time we do it? I do think 6 weeks of the Northwest Current is excessive, I agree. Maybe you do 3 weeks. If we can get free on Chenleytown, Chevy Chase, Forest Hills listservs, I don't see why we should even pay Cleveland Park. Let's see what we get. Maybe we don't have to pay them. Maybe they'll be sorry they didn't let us do it for free.
Okay.
And I don't know if we need an ad. Why can't we just do what we normally do when we post our agendas? Put a line on there that says,
I mean,
that we're accepting doing
I think the
grants.
reason this came up was because people aren't applying for them, and we thought maybe this might work. That was what I thought was the basis for this.
It is exactly the basis that we're going to get the financial report. We're in very good economic, very good financial
We're
health.
fine.
But we're
We're in
also,
very good financial health, and I am now moving into my, what month is this? July 7th, 8th month, and we've got a goose egg on my tenure in terms of the number of grant proposals that
but we haven't advertised them, and this will be the first time we're doing it in actually on the listservs and in the Northwest Current. We've never done that.
There you go.
God,
You're
we
making
have,
the argument.
have
No, I'm
any
just saying,
ANCs
6
ever
weeks ago.
bought an
They
ad to advertise grants? I'm just curious.
They have in the past, Sally.
No, I'm asking right now, in the last 7 months.
We haven't advertised that we're accepting.
Bob, do you
them.
have any thoughts?
Sure.
The ANC knows it.
We have 3 months before we do our budget, so I think that if we approve 1,500 now, we can cover what we want to cover and then put an adequate amount in the budget for the fiscal year starting October 1st.
Okay, so my magic number was 1,200.
I can live with that.
And, I would just say that, I think that we're public stewards of this money, and I think it's great that you all have really been cautious, but I also feel that it's taxpayer money and it's time to return it to the community where it's intended to serve. And if it means that we have to spend money to make people aware of what's available, then I think we should spend money. So I would propose that in addition to the $300 trifold, that we spend $1,200 and that we do it as a one-time thing and reassess the effectiveness, and in 6 months or whatever our next cycle is, come back and reassess.
Fair enough. Are you proposing a resolution, or
Yes,
a
yes.
resolution on that?
I'll call that a resolution.
Sounds good. David, do you have any thoughts?
In general, I just wouldn't like to see, I guess, more than 10% of the money we allocate for grants spent promoting grants.
Fair enough.
And on top of that, I'd also like to see us kind of exhaust the free options for promotion before we go into pay options, because I think there are other listservs. I mean, community listservs should, in theory, welcome the fact that someone's saying we want to give money to people here. So.
We're not trying to make money as opposed to, which is
Right,
what
we're
most
not.
of the commercials are, right?
Okay, so right now we have a resolution to approve $1,200. What that would do is get us like 3 weeks of some small ads in the Current and leave up some money for whatever else, who knows. So I guess, does anyone have any comments on $1,200? One time, and then we'll reassess.
I have.
Do we have a second for 1,200? I will second it.
Will that cover 3 ads
Yes.
in the current?
Yes. Okay, so we have a.
Does that cover designing the ad, or does the Northwest Current help us with that? I don't know what the cost
I
of the
can
ad
do,
is.
I can do,
that's why I'm asking.
that's something I can do, actually. It's pretty easy.
Okay, I guess I don't know, how much is an ad in the Northwest Current?
It is $360.
Okay, so it's 360 times 3 ads?
So that's 1,080.
Okay.
And that would leave $120 for who knows. Anyone else have any discussion on $1,200?
It's 1,200, then we're voting on plus the 300.
We already voted and approved
Okay.
$300, so $1,200. So all in favor of $1,200 for marketing one time, and then seeing what response, if any, we get. Say aye. Approve 700. All right, next 3 small items. Let's do the financial update, Bob.
Our current available balance is $135,025.35. That's 135,025.35. Currently available.
Next item, approval.
Yes, we can buy another ANC.
Wait a minute.
That's a quarter to
What's this rental? For 2,140?
We can ask about them next. So,
Oh, okay.
quarterly financial report. Bob, do you have any? You want to go over it, or
We can. Karen, you just raised the office equipment. That's actual office equipment purchase, not rental. It's hard to see the line going across, but that is for purchase. and that is for the equipment needed for the live streaming.
Oh, okay.
Any other questions on the financial report? Bob, we need to vote on it, right?
Yes,
Okay.
we have to vote.
So I'll make a resolution to approve the quarterly financial report. Does anyone second that?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Unanimously approved. Lastly, website design. I spoke with a person living in Ward 3 that is a graphic designer that I know pretty well, which is Claudia, I can't say her last name, Baragon. She and her husband own a graphic design, web design firm. I asked them to make a proposal for revamping our website. Basically, the issue with the website is the software we're running it on is out of date, and I just don't have the time to keep reprogramming it to make it work. And I give it about 6 months until something new comes along and it doesn't work. So what I wanted someone to do is propose moving our current site to WordPress. It's a program that everyone uses, and it's the latest and greatest way to run a website. That would include this person moving all our stuff over to this, configuring it, setting up analytics so we can analyze who's coming and see where they're coming from. They're going to kind of revamp and refresh the logo and the pictures. They're going to train us how to use it, and then they're going to integrate it better with social media like Twitter and Facebook. They're also going to make a way so each commissioner for their SMD can have like a blog type website that a few of you have requested. So you could have like manoli.anc3f.us, and you could do whatever you want there if you wanted.
Cross-post the log, the Forest Hills log, which already exists. I can do that.
Whatever you want. And if you don't want to use it, you don't want to use it, but it's pretty easy to do. And then the site will also work on like iPhones and iPads and things like that. So the estimate on the proposal was $2,200 from this person. I think it will be a little bit more because I need to make sure everyone's trained and knows how to use it, because I don't want to be the only one. So I'm thinking $2,500. So what I would like to do is propose that we budget $2,500. It could come in quite less if it's easy to do. Who knows? But $2,500 to revamp our website, as I explained. So is there a second for that? Thank you. Is there any discussion
I
on
have
it?
some.
Karen?
I have to be honest.
Yep,
I don't know whether you got other proposals also, because I
Yep.
would like to see them.
I did.
And the reason I'm asking that is, Claudia is on the Ward 3 Dems exec
She
committee
is.
meeting, exec committee, whatever. And she redid the Ward 3 Dems website, and I'm very unimpressed with it. And I think before we just pick that company, we ought to see what she's going to do graphically, et cetera. Because the Ward 3 Dems logo and everything else and what she showed us is not impressive at all. And that's,
I don't believe it's, I don't
Who
know.
are the other companies you,
I talked to another company, Lev Interactive. They were like $3,500. I don't know them. They were on some listserv I reached out to, and I talked to another friend who does freelance, and he was a lot more.
you know, to me, I guess, to
I mean,
me,
we could propose her to show what the graphics look like, but we will have to pay someone to do
you know,
that.
I think what I'm saying is, if we're gonna redo our website, I wanna see it redone so that we don't have to keep redoing it. And I would
Right.
rather spend a little bit more upfront and have what we want than just a piece of paper with a list of prices. I would like to actually see what it's going to look like and whatever.
I was going to say, you know, I've never been on the Ward 3 Democrats
Yeah,
site,
I
but
have not either. I don't know.
maybe she could give us 3 sites that she's designed, and we could look at that and get an idea of what she does. Sometimes it's because of the person she's designing it for.
I agree.
So maybe they wanted it to look that way. But if she gave us 3 that maybe would be reflective of what she'd like to do for us, but maybe what we could do is go ahead and approve the allocation, and then,
See, I would like not to approve an allocation, because if it's another company and it's more money, we've waited this long. I think we ought to come up with the company that we want and then do an allocation. You know, why budget 2,500 if somebody else is gonna want 3,000?
No, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, this is a person I know and I'm comfortable working with, and I've seen a website that she's designed, and I thought it was very nice. So I don't know what website you're referring to, in all honesty, because it's not a public website yet, but I've seen what she has designed for that organization, and it looked good to me.
Can you send us a link? Or can she send us something?
It should be public in a week or two, so you can probably see it then. I mean, I'm comfortable with this person. I'm happy to defer the website redesign to some other commissioner if they wish to handle this. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm comfortable with them, and I think they'll do a good job, and they live in our ward. They're not in our ANC, but close enough. Or we can, you know, I can keep looking, but I don't know who any of these other people are, so.
Okay, but just have her send.
But yeah, I'm happy. So I guess.
Some
And she's-
links.
Yeah, she can, as Mary Beth said. She
No,
can,
okay.
You know, she can, in 2 weeks, you can send the link to the Ward 3 Dems, and then if she's designed other things,
I think
why
that's,
can't we look at it?
No, I think that's perfectly fair.
We
So I
should
think,
be able
so
to.
I think
It's
at this
the
point, the
designer.
resolution that's been seconded is to approve $2,500 for a website. Let's vote or vote against it, and then we can continue on. So, all
Do
in,
you have any recommendations for web design for other ANCs?
I don't think this would be a good time.
Most are terrible.
Was that?
Most are terrible.
anyway, so I mean, a lot like the 3 E1s made by Sam Sarabin, who's a commissioner there. So they obviously aren't paying someone for that, and I think some of the others are made by other commissioners. I just, at this point, I don't
Has
have time.
anybody talked to Bob Maudlin, who used to do our website,
I have not talked to Bob Maudlin.
and he lives in our ANC?
Nope.
He was on
No.
our ANC.
Anyway, so the resolution at the point is to allocate $2,500 to hire this company to do the website. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
So we got 5, 4.
David, are you voting?
Voting now.
You're voting to approve the person I want, but
Okay.
That's
are you
what
with
we're
us
voting
here?
on.
Wait a minute, you need to do this again,
Wait,
Adam.
yeah.
the resolution that we're voting on and it was seconded was to hire Claudia and her company to redesign the website for $2,500.
Without any of us looking at what she's designed.
Correct. That is what we're voting on at this
I can
moment.
do that.
Okay. So
That's-
all in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. 3 all against. 2 all abstaining.
It
2.
passes.
That pass?
Yeah, because 2 abstained.
3, 2, 2.
There you go.
3 to 2.
All right. Passed.
So we're hiring somebody sight unseen.
But I mean, Adam,
I don't
you'll
understand
have
that. You
her-
don't
I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
You
So
did
we'll.
stuff at your house.
So we're gonna
I
have
mean,
like
you
work.
vetted these people.
Yes, this is a person I'm
And so-
comfortable hiring, and that's why I propose
Okay.
to use taxpayer
So
money
that
to
one
And I
hire
would
this
just
person.
say, as public relations with the rest of your colleagues,
Yeah, we'll get some
share some
demo and
examples.
we'll do that. That's fine. I don't have a problem with that. Anyway, okay. So that is all. At this point, I'd like to propose that we adjourn our
No, I
meeting
have
and
an exec session.
I don't, does that need to be a public?
Yes. No.
Okay.
No, not
What?
public.
Okay.
Then we're adjourned.
So, all in favor of adjourning? Hey, congrats, guys. July meeting is over. Karen, you can speak now.
Are we having an August meeting? I forgot
No.
to ask that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless we need one, but right now, we do not.
What about for that liquor license?
What liquor license?
For that new
I don't know, I'm
business?
talking to them.
Okay.
Is the
The
meeting,
what?
is
What
the
liquor
meeting on
license?
Thursday?
New business coming to town.
Real